We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys. I'm back and I bring to you the part 3 of What If Naruto Gained Unwanted Immortality. The fourth Shinobi War has ended with the sealing of Kaguya and the Juubi in Naruto. As the years pass and his unwanted immortality becomes clear, what will Naruto do when everyone he once fought for returns to dust as the world about him changes? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 17, The Beginning of Something Beautiful. As Naruto's consciousness returned to his body, he felt a presence sitting by his side. As he opened his eyes, he was shocked to see an unusual worried look on Arya's normally impassive face as her emerald green eyes that put to shame the green of the forest, stared right into his sky blue eyes. "Are you alright, Naruto? Did the Manoa tree harm you?" Arya softly asked. "I am fine, Arya. I was merely talking to the spirit of Linnea that was within the Manoa tree. I offered to purify the negative feelings in the nature chakra that ran through her, and in return she promised several things. To be honest, she did not need to give me anything, as I would have done it anyways," Naruto said as stood up to leave, but not before leaving a clone to purify the nature chakra of the Manoa tree. "Naruto, just why do you do this? For someone far more powerful than anyone I have ever known, you do not abuse your powers. I know that you, like us, are far older than what you appear to be and has thus seen the ugliness of this world. You have seen and even experienced unwarranted rage, hatred, jealousy, and contempt ever since you were young. So now that you have such power, how can you be content to not destroy the world that has so wronged you?" Arya asked, wanting to know more about what drove her newest friend. Naruto paused as he was walking away, and then tilted his head back towards Arya, such that she could see half of his face but not his eyes. "Arya, as you know, humans and all living beings have their ugly parts. And sometimes, those ugly parts overwhelm themselves such that it appears that they are merely that, just ugly and twisted beings. But no, for most people, there are experiences behind them to make them display such a dark side. The villagers in my memory, it was not their fault, at least not completely. Most of them had justifiable reasons for hating the being that was sealed in me, even if they expressed their hatred the wrong way. So I hated them, in the beginning. Then as I gained comrades, I discovered what I wanted. I only wanted to protect the ones that gave my life meaning, and if they wanted to protect the village, then so did I. Then that man came into the village and annihilated it within a moment. When I was about to lose, my beloved came to save me, at the cost of her life. That was the first time I experienced such pure rage and hatred. When I finally had that man's life in my very hands, I realized that if I killed him, then I would become just like the villagers that tortured me when I was but a child. It was then I found the strength to forgive them for everything they had done and give them a second chance. And guess what? They never betrayed my trust ever since. Sometimes, people get lost and sometimes, all they need is a little help. Remember that, Arya," Naruto said as he walked past the ring of elves that parted before him. Arya looked at the back of Naruto as he disappeared amongst the elves. Then she looked back at the Manoa tree and thought back to what happened. Flashback. Arya watched as Naruto stretched his palms onto the trunk of the Manoa tree when suddenly strange circular markings appeared on his face. She curiously wondered where they came from when she suddenly felt as if she was in the center of a hurricane of life. So this is the nature chakra that Naruto keeps going on about. Arya mused as seemingly every elf approached the Manoa tree while looking at the now unconscious blonde in various emotions, ranging from curiosity to hostility. Soon Queen Islanzati walked past the crowd and asked Arya while pointing towards Naruto, "What is he doing to the Manoa tree? And what is that aura of power around him? It feels like the same energy from the Manoa tree," Queen Islanzati asked, noticing the circular marks on Naruto's face. "Mother, he is surrounded by what he calls nature chakra, which allows him to enter a state of complete oneness with nature itself. I believe he used this state to come into contact with the Manoa tree's consciousness directly. He asked me about the Manoa tree after noticing the strange dual energy signature of the tree. So I told him Linnea's story. He then said that he had felt deep regret, shame, and rage emanating from the Manoa and wanted to help her purify those feelings due to pity and feeling that she did not deserve such a punishment." Arya explained to her mother as they both looked at Naruto. However, they were shocked when tree roots from the Manoa tree suddenly grabbed onto the blonde and attempted to crush him. Soon he was buried within the roots. Arya immediately started to run towards Naruto, but was stopped by Queen Islanzadi's hand that appeared before her. "Stop, Arya, it is too dangerous. Even with how powerful you are, you would not be able to make a difference between those two." As Queen Islanzadi was saying this, the roots around Naruto suddenly broke up apart into pieces and rained onto the ground. Then they watched in amazement as a green glow appeared around the blonde. Soon the blonde then fell to the ground unconscious as his body worked to integrate the newly absorbed powers that were granted to him by Linnea. "I see that no harm has been done to either the Manoa tree or to Naruto, so I will take my leave. Daughter, while we may not know the blonde that well, anyone that has been blessed by the Manoa tree cannot be a person with bad intentions towards us elves. Also, do not think that I have not noticed the looks you have been giving to Naruto Finiral." Queen Islanzadi slightly smiled at Arya's slightly confused face. "I see that you still regard him as only a friend. Just make sure that whatever you choose, do not regret it, for that would be the worst thing to do given our immortality," Queen Islanzadi said as she walked away from Arya and back to her home. Arya stood there for a whole minute, thinking about the words her mother just told her, before turning towards the blonde and sitting next to him while observing his face while looking at his whisker marks, wondering if they were like a fox's. Before she could stop herself, she stroked one of the marks on his cheek and was startled, and a purr-like rumble came from the blonde. She continued doing so with a soft smile on her face for a while before just sitting there, waiting for Naruto to wake up. Flashback end. The following month passed in a blur to the group. Naruto sparred and learned about magic and the ancient language under Arya while thinking of how to teach Arya how to use Chakra. He also asked Oromiz several questions about the beginning and history of the elves. From what he learned, he estimated that when the elves first left, they were similar to the civilians of the elemental nations. As they passed through the time/space barrier, the chakra pathways of the elves probably mutated so that they were not able to retain chakra within the pathways, but instead had it distributed into their very muscles and bones, enhancing their strength and speed but leaving them rather rudimentary in the magic department. This all changed however after Du Fyrn Skullblika, the war between the elves and dragons. At the end, the dragons granted the elves immortality and magical power while the elves in return gave them their language. Naruto realized that the dragons must have somehow revitalized the elves' dormant chakra pathways when they supercharged them into order to grant them immortality. This was why the elves were so much stronger than even some human riders. The strength of the shinobi people that was initially suppressed was finally awoken by the dragons. He then hypothesized that the dragons probably realized this and thus whenever they bonded to other human riders, they instinctively created chakra pathways in their riders in order to emulate what they did with the elves. Aragon in the meantime continued learning more about the ancient language and its complexities, what it meant to be a rider, swordsmanship with an arrogant elf named Vanir, and finally the occasional life lessons the blonde gave him when they started talking. In particular, there was one talk that Aragon took to heart. Flashback. Naruto, why do you fight? Aragon asked Naruto as they sat next to each other in Oromiz's cabin when the blonde came to ask Oromiz a few questions regarding the history of the elves. What brought this on? Naruto asked, amused by the questions, but then noticed the serious expression on Aragon's face. Earlier, Oromiz asked me why I fought the Empire. I responded that I fought to help those who suffer under his rule and to a lesser extent, for vengeance. But then brought up that this war would cause more suffering than it would heal, and I could not deny him this. While I have gotten over who I am now lost at why do I fight? Aragon said with a confused tone. Silence pervaded between the two until Naruto sighed. Aragon, first let me ask, why do you think I fight? Well, considering you are helping the Varden and the elves, would say that you are fighting to end the war so that others would not have to suffer. Aragon responded after thinking. Naruto slightly nodded as he heard Aragon's answer. True, that is a fine reason to fight, but that is not the reason why I fight. Back in my homeland, I initially fought in a war to break the chain of hatred that had caused so many wars and suffering over the years. I just wanted people to be able to understand each other. I thought that once they did that there would be no need for wars. Aragon listened with rapt attention, having never thought about the possibility of all living beings of Allegezia ever truly understanding each other and letting go of the chains of hatred that wrapped around each race. Were you successful? To an extent, I was. The major villages of the elemental nations finally had peace with each other after defeating a common foe that brought us down to our very knees. But along the way, while that was my reason for fighting at the time, it was never truly mine. I soon realized that I had an even simpler reason for fighting, one that far surpassed having others understand each other. It was to simply protect my precious ones. The reason I fight seems so simple to the point of juvenile, but unlike the previous reason, this one came from the very depths of my soul. It is the one reason that I can abandon anything and even become a monster if I need to, as long as I can keep them safe. So try to think of a reason that comes from you and not just from somebody else. Do this, or one day you will regret for not finding it sooner. Naruto said as he walked away, leaving Aragon thinking silently over the blonde's reason for fighting. Flashback end. Thank you, Naruto. I have finally discovered what is truly important to me, things that I refuse to give up even if it meant giving up my very life. Aragon thought with a smile as he scratched Saphira's nose. Aragon, have you prepared for the Agiti Blodron? The celebration is within 2 days and you are expected to present something that represents you, whether that be an object or elvish poem. Oromiz asked, interrupting Aragon's thoughts. Master, actually I have thought about what I want to share at the Agiti Blodron. I hope you and the others enjoy it when I finally present it. Aragon said while wondering what Naruto would present, knowing that he would present something if only to not embarrass Arya during such an important celebration. It was amusingly clear that the two were interested in each other, although the two powerful and intelligent beings were somehow completely oblivious to each other's feelings. Little one, are you sure you are willing to give up on the elf? If I remember correctly, you did develop a liking for her, especially for her appearance. Saphira thought. While I may have developed a small crush on Arya when I first met and rescued her, I realized in Farthendur that our beliefs are just too different. This was further compounded when I learned just how old Arya was. I could never compare to the amount of experience Arya has gone through. And then it finally ended when I heard the tale of the Manoa tree and the elf maiden Linnea and her cheating lover. I realized that that could easily have been me. After all, who is to say that I won't desire a mate closer to my age? Besides, with me being a dragon rider, there is no rush. Aragon said, though their mental link. I'm glad that Master Oromiz's lessons have come to fruition, Aragon. You have finally started thinking logically rather with only your heart. While thinking with your heart is good, sometimes it could end up hurting others if it is not restrained by the logical thinking of the mind. Humph, personally I never understood your infatuation with Arya. I mean, think about it. 100 years old is like a grandma to humans, and while you two are immortal, you still have human values. Imagine marrying a grandma. Just by pure life experience you two could never find a common ground. For now, all you need is me. Saphira puffed out. What would I do without you, my better half of existence? Actually, don't answer that, I can imagine. Aragon thought as he drew out an ink and brush to start writing his poem for the Agiti Blodron. Chapter 18, An Agiti Blodron to Remember. Clash. Clang. Sparks and sweat flew across one of the many meadows surrounding the city of the elves as two combatants, one male and the other female, human and elf, locked their blades for but an instant before whirling away in an effort to either force or beat the other into submission. The grass beneath their feet were long bent or cut into halves from the sheer pressure of the duo's movements. Their forms a blur, they clashed again and again, offense and defense perfected from decades of practice and killing. Had they been equal in physique, perhaps their duel would have lasted for many more hours. Unfortunately, they weren't. Hacking down, the woman finally made a mistake when she attempted to bat away the man's seemingly flimsy defense, arms trembling with sweat almost blinding her from enduring numerous forceful strikes, only for him to subtly shift to the side, parry the blade to the side and sweep a kunai towards her neck. Panting in exhaustion, she stiffened when cold steel tickled the soft flesh of her throat. For a moment, the world slowed down as Emerald stared into Sapphire, before swiftly resuming as she slowly lowered her sword in practiced surrender. She'd lost, again. With a wide grin, her sparring partner withdrew his weapons of choice and took a step back while she sheathed her sword. Twirling his twin pair of kunai, he resealed them in a puff of smoke. You're getting better, princess. I swear, you almost nicked me back there. Walking over to the log with their other equipment, he couldn't help but tease the aloof elf while tossing over a towel and water skin. Catching the thrown items, Arya merely shot an exasperated glare at him, long used to his quips of her title and much to her consternation. losing, only to huff when she saw his insufferable grin widen. Not bothering to give him the satisfaction of a proper response, she instead proceeded to elegantly sit down next him while wiping away her sweat and drinking from the skin, sighing in contentment at the sweet hint of honey added to the water. Even exhausted, she moved with an inhuman grace. However, when Arya glanced at her companion, her eyebrow couldn't help but twitch at the almost complete lack of sweat on his body. Other than a few drops here and there, you'd think he'd just come back from a refreshing walk through the forest. But it didn't last long. Instead of dwelling on her inability to land a proper blow on the man, she unsheathed her sword and fished out a file and rag from a leather pouch on the log. Soon, the sound of steel grinding on steel filled the clearing. As she swept the file across the length of her blade, Arya asked, "Naruto, do you have something for the upcoming Agiti Blodron?" Agiti Blodron? What's that? Blinking owlishly, Naruto responded with a question, wondering what she was talking about. Pausing, Arya turned to him in disbelief. You mean Oromi Zelda hasn't told you? I thought he would have told you about the celebration that is only held once every 100 years. When she saw Naruto truly had no idea what she was talking about, she placed the file to the side. The Agiti Blodron is a symbol of the end of the Du Fyrn Skolblika, or the Dragon War, where all inhibitions are released. It's a time when we freely display our emotions. The celebration begins at midnight and then lasts for 3 days. On each day, everyone presents something that represents them to the others, whether they be a poem or craft. Wiping her sword with a rag, she resheathed it. Well, I guess there is something that I can do for the celebration. But tell me, are you going to present something to the others? Naruto asked back as he watched Arya frown at the question. I still do not know what to present this celebration. This will be my first Agiti Blodron, and with me carrying Saphira's egg across Alagizia for the past few decades, I have not thought that I would attend this century's celebration. So I do not know what to do. Arya said in a somewhat depressed tone, shamed that she could not think of anything to show to the rest of her kind. In that case, how about you do something with me? I have an idea that I will need your help with. Naruto said with a gleam in his eyes as Arya shot her head up towards the blondes with a grateful smile. 3 days later, with but few minutes left until the start of the festival, Naruto, dressed in an orange kimono lined in black with little red spirals, made his way from his residence to the Manoa tree. A large throng of elves, with many he had never seen before, already surrounded the clearing. However, a familiar face leaned against a tree a few steps from the crowd, still donned in her usual leather armor. Walking up to Arya, Naruto cocked his head to the side as he took in her unfestival-like attire. While Naruto was making his way towards her, Arya also noted his odd, but attractive, attire. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, but if she had to make a comparison, she would say it looked like a robe worn by some nobles, if with an exotic appeal, especially the way it exposed his chiseled chest. Her eyes narrowed. Was that a scar dash, like what you see? Eyebrow quirked, Naruto asked as he crossed his arms, which managed to not only coincidentally hide the scar on his left chest, but also bring more attention to his pecs. Startled out of her brief reverie, a faint heat creeped up Arya's neck when he winked at her. Suppressing her blush, as well as an odd feeling growing within her gut, with a cough, she ignored his incessant teasing in favor of questioning him what he was wearing. And what are you wearing? I have never seen anything like it. Ah, this? Back home, this is called a kimono. It's usually worn during festivals or times of great celebration. Naruto explained before pointing at her own outfit. And what about you? Are you really gonna wear that to a celebration that only occurs once every 100 years? Arya's expression darkened and his question unintentionally brought up a rather embarrassing memory when she was much younger and far more hot-headed. But before she could answer, Naruto shrugged. He had seen odder things in life. Meh, ain't the strangest thing I've seen people wear to a festival. Holding out an arm, Naruto motioned towards the clearing. Shall we? Arya glanced at the proffered limb before giving a subtle nod. Their extensive time together, from their daily spars to their lessons on the ancient language, had done wonders with bringing the two closer. Out of everyone in Elesmera, including her mother, he was perhaps the one she felt most comfortable with. So, with practiced ease, she slipped her arm through his while still maintaining a respectable distance, enough to show they were merely friends and not lovers. As one, they made their way to the Manoa tree, passing through the gathering of elves under the gentle glow of floating war lights. At the tree itself stood Queen Islanzati, garbed in brilliant crimson robes and a mantle of white swan feathers, while on her brow rested a simple gold circlet. Once midnight struck, the queen of the elves raised her left arm and pointed toward the new moon. A soft white orb gathered itself above her palm from the light emitted by the lanterns that dotted the Manoa tree. Walking along the root to the massive trunk, she placed the orb in a hollow in the bark, where it remained, pulsing. Soon after she did, Arya pulled Naruto's arm and laughed. "It is begun. The celebration will last until the whirlight expends itself." Naruto stared in wonder as allowed himself to be tugged about by the laughing elf, stunned by both the fact she was laughing, which rarely did, and the beauty of her laughter. The next few hours were filled with the songs of the elves as each of their songs weaved together into a larger enchantment that shrouded all of the elves and the group and worked to heighten the senses, remove inhibitions, and burnish the revels with fey magic. Naruto listened as he heard grand tales of swords and magic, the rise and fall of kings, and finally the war between the dragons and elves. Suddenly, his mind was harshly nudged. "Ow, Kurama, what was that for? This singing was putting you under a genjutsu-like spell, much like those two old toads did when they combined their singing. Your resistance toward such powerful genjutsus in your suppressed state has been lowered enough for you to begin falling under it," Kurama informed, slitted eyes narrowed in caution. "I know, but I don't sense any ill intent. Besides, it seems all the others are letting themselves be enchanted in order to enhance the festivities. For this festival, let me revel in it. It's been a while since I was last part of one," Naruto said as he comforted Kurama that they were in no danger. "Fine brat, but any hint of danger, and I'm coming out." Kurama snorted before closing his eyes to nap. Naruto nodded and simply sat there as he experienced the celebration's effects. As time passed, he started becoming more active in the festival, from first drinking and eating with the elves to dancing along with different elves. That was when his memory started becoming slightly blurry. However, he did remember dancing with many other elven maidens, but mostly with Arya and even a few times with Queen Islanzati. By the time his mind cleared, he realized it was the third day already, and that it was time for everyone to present their poems and crafts. "I hope that I really don't embarrass myself on this. And really hope that the thing with Arya will work. Maybe I should have tried test running it with her before actually doing it now that I think about it," Naruto thought as Kurama facepalmed. "Idiot," Kurama muttered. Naruto's thoughts were interrupted when he heard Aragon's voice suddenly resound through the now silent glade by the Manoa tree. He had written an elvish-style poem of a man that voyaged to the land of Durza, where he found and fought the foe, despite the cold terror within his heart. Yet, though at last he triumphed, the man withheld the fatal blow, for now that he had defeated his enemy, he did not fear the doom of mortals. He did not need to kill the foe in Durza. Then the man sheathed his sword and returned home and wed his love on summer's eve. With her, he spent his many days content until his beard was long and white. However, in the end, as the foe stood before the man held no more fear towards his old foe and instead welcomed him like an old friend as they both left for the land of Durza to forever dwell in peace in the land of shadows. Although Aragon never mentioned himself, Naruto and the other elves could sense the similarities and hence the hardships that Aragon had gone through ever since he had left on his long journey with Saphira. After Aragon's work was added to the elves' great library and he recited his poem one last time, Saphira was next. A large black rock that was glossy and had intricate patterns was brought out and then set on fire, making the sculpture glow red at the edges as the flames made the sculpture pulse hypnotically. After a round of applause by the elves, Glader brought out a slab of red oak with a lifelike appearance of Elesmera seen from above, while Oromiz presented an intricate and beautiful scroll that showed a copy of a famous elven poem, as well as a panorama of a breathtaking landscape that displayed extreme artistry, skill. Finally, it was Naruto's turn. As he walked towards the center, it seemed as if the Manoa tree straightened just a bit and the elves wondered what exactly this foreigner would do. "First, I wanted to give you the words of an important figure in my life that have shaped my life and will continue to do so," Naruto said as he then began in the ancient language. "Where the leaves dance, fire burns. The shadow of the fire will flash over the village, and the leaves will grow once again." It was short and wasn't the most prettily phrased, but it conveyed a sense of hope and sheer dedication to those in the clearing as Naruto finished his short poem that were the last words of Sarutobi Hiruzen, the third Hokage of Konoha. "Naruto Finiero, what does this poem mean?" Queen Islanzati asked for all of them. "In my village, we lived out a saying called the Will of Fire. It states that the entire village is like a large family unit in every shinobi, or warrior, with the will of fire loves, believes, cherishes, and fights to protect the village, as previous generations had done before them. And as long the will of fire burns, the village will forever stand strong. This is the philosophy that I live by. It is how I have lived by protecting my loved ones from any harm even at the cost of myself. And it will continue be the way I live. Naruto announced as the Queeness Lanzotti bowed her head and thought of all the times she had pushed away her own daughter. As she turned towards Arya, she was surprised that Arya was already looking back at her, with true forgiveness shining in her eyes. Slowly Queeness Lanzotti looked away as tears ran down her cheek before saying, "I thank you Naruto Finiero, for you have reminded me of something so important, and yet so basic, that I have neglected after all these years. Arya, do you truly forgive me? Will allow me to love you as I had the day you were born into this world?" Queeness Lanzotti said while asking Arya. With a strong light in her eyes, Arya nodded. "I do mother, and you have forever held that right. Just know that even when you turned me away from your halls, I too have only loved you." Naruto clapped as he said, "Okay, enough of that. I think it's time to end this part of the celebration with a bang. Now back up people, back up." As the elves, with far more respect for the blonde than before, did so, Naruto flashed through several hand signs, inhaled, and breathed out a mighty dragon of fire that could have enveloped the entirety of Elesmera while yelling out, "Katan, Goryuka no Jutsu," before spatting out several more, but smaller dragon heads and saying, "Katan, Ryuan Hoka no Jutsu." The elves and the dragons looked in astonishment and wonder at the amount of flames that seemed alive as the dragons swirled in the sky while roaring out to the heavens. Suddenly, Naruto called out to Arya, "Hey Arya, get over here. It's our turn now." Arya looked confusedly at the blonde before remembering their last words together before clearing the gap between them with a single leap. As soon as she landed, Naruto said, "Put your palm on top of mine and send as much energy as you can. I'll handle the rest." Arya looked in doubt at Naruto before nodding and sent as much magic as she could to her palm. Before long, a viridian ball of pure energy levitated above her palm. Then Naruto gently placed his hand under Arya's and whispered, "Trust me." Rasengan. A small spinning ball of pure chakra appeared within the green ball of magic. Slowly, Naruto added more and more chakra as the two spheres merged together until it grew to a giant glowing ball of chakra and magic, plunging the clearing into a greenish-blue light as if they were at the bottom of a lake. Soon the Rasengan grew to the size of Saphira and Glade when the giant dragon of fire suddenly started to fly down towards the duo along with the other smaller dragon heads. Before the elves could yell out in alarm, Naruto winked at Arya, cocked their arms back, and threw the ball at the descending dragons. When they made contact, an enormous multicolored explosion rang out as the united Rasengan pushed the dragons higher and higher, producing colored explosions along the way until it reached the height of the highest peaks of the Beer Mountains and fully exploded out in a brilliant display of blue, green, red, and every color in between. As the lights faded away, the elves all around exploded into cheers and laughs at seeing such a spectacle. Back on the ground, Arya looked in astonishment at the man beside her before gently smiling as she slightly leaned against him, her energy almost completely spent from the flashy light show. Queeness Lanzotti walked to the pair while smiling. "Thank you once again Naruto Finiero for such a beautiful spectacle. Now, it is time for the last part of the Agiti Blotron," she said while stepping back, allowing two beautiful elf-maids show were similar in every way except for their hair. One had tresses as black as a forgotten pool, while the other had hair that gleamed like burnished silver, walked towards the center of the space. Chapter 19, Bonding. As the twin elf maidens got into position, Naruto heard Oromiz mutter with a rare hint of reverence to Aragon. "The caretakers, Iduna and Nea. Watch you carefully, for this is of great importance to your heritage as riders." "Caretakers of what?" Naruto cocked his head towards the dragon rider pair to his left as Aragon and Saphira nodded in understanding. He was curious of what could invoke such respect from the elder elf who lived for almost a millennium. While wondering if he should ask him what he meant directly, a most interesting sight in the corner of his peripheral vision caught his attention. As one, Iduna and Nea raised their hands to the brooches holding their white robes in place and unclasped them, letting them fall to the ground in a small heap to reveal they wore nothing underneath, as nude as the day they were born. Except for one thing. A dragon tattoo, as thick as an arm and more intricate than any painting, coiled over every inch of their slender bodies. Its scales dyed with all the colors of the rainbow and every shade in between. Orbs the color of rubies fiercely glared at them all from Nea's chest. Its ivory claws jealously clenched over her modest breasts and her sister's buttocks as its tail lazily wrapped around the latter's left ankle. Naruto blinked in surprise, more startled than anything else at the twins' sudden disrobing, before hearing what suspiciously sounded like a fish choking on air. Glancing to the side, he chuckled when he saw the one teenager in the forest turn away, his tanned neck and cheeks now dark from embarrassment, though not without taking a few poorly hidden peeks at the sisters' lightly heaving chests, before swiftly hiding his swiftly reddening face behind his hands when he saw Naruto wriggle his saffron eyebrows in a knowing manner. Chortling in amusement, the blonde exchanged a knowing look with an also smiling Oromiz. "Oh, Aragon. It's times like this I suddenly remember he's still just a boy with hardly any hair down there. This is probably his first time ever seeing a naked woman not related to him in some way, and for it to not just be one, but two exceedingly beautiful and exotic elves, twins at that." Naruto lightly exhaled before snorting in amusement when Saphira flicked her rider over his head with a bone-white claw and almost faceplanted him into the ground. Poor boy never stood a chance. Watching Aragon regain his balance and sputter about for a little while longer, Naruto eventually shifted his attention back to the twins to admire them, though more for the exquisite piece of art that stretched between the two rather than their bodies. As Hokage of Konoha and husband to one of the princesses of the noble Hyuga clan, he was no stranger to art, having seen and even been gifted many fine works and masterpieces, some of which could buy several small mountains or even one of the minor shinobi villages. Suddenly, as he observed how the iridescent scales seemed to somehow glimmer under the elven lanterns, he felt a small, almost undetectable, surge of negativity next to him. Had he not made it a habit to immediately notice of even the faintest trace of negativity towards him, combined with the enchanted drinks and beguiling spells spun around the clearing, he might have missed the nearly non-existent signal. Breaking off his gaze from the sisters, Naruto curiously peeked to the right just in time to see a certain elf swiftly swivel her head back towards the ritual, a small, but obvious, frown etched between her eyebrows. Naruto tilted his head in confusion at Arya's odd action. "Just what's up with her? Are you seriously asking that?" "That was a rhetorical question, Kurama. No need to get all snippy." "Humph, I'm sure it was. And who the hell are you calling snippy, you man-child? Why, you overgrown piece of—" While Naruto mentally bantered with Kurama, a muscle on Arya's jaw twitched as a growing headache pounded between her ears. Closing her eyes, she sighed in frustration before massaging her temples while a strange mixture of confusion, envy, and annoyance churned within the pit of her stomach. Through it all, the elf wondered why she suddenly felt so irritated when she saw Naruto gaze at the naked twins with interest, having never experienced anything of the sort when they were making their way up to Elesmera or during the times they spent together in the past month. It simply didn't make any sense. They'd barely known each for a couple of months. But whatever the reason was, it was enough to dampen the jubilant mood induced by the spells and drinks of the celebration, by no means an easy feat. Only after regulating her breathing and mentally reciting her favorite bit of elvish poetry did the pounding headache begin to recede as Arya managed to rein in the more bothersome emotions, soon forcing them down to more manageable levels. Taking a deep breath, she returned her attention to the twins as they kicked their discarded cloaks to the side. With everyone distracted by the sisters in the center, nobody noticed the subtle actions of the princess of the elves. Except one. Though it took Arya merely a few seconds to regain her composure while maintaining an outwardly normal appearance, she might as well have been screaming out in pain for the world to hear to Naruto as he covertly peered at her in concern. Combined with his ability to sense negative emotions, whatever Arya was going through was laid out to him like an open book, if said book was a teenage angst-filled novel, filled with sharp edges. Honestly, how did the others nearby not notice this? But just as he was about to ask what was wrong, a soft thump reached his ears. Looking back, he saw the twins lift their feet and bring them onto the ground for a second thump. On the third thump, the musicians struck their drums in rhythm. A thump later, the harpists plucked the strings of their gilt instruments, and a moment after that, those elves with flutes joined the throbbing melody. Slowly at first, but with gathering speed, Iduna and Nea began to dance, marking time with the stamp of their feet on the dirt and undulating so that it was not they who seemed to move but the dragon upon them. Round and round they went, and the dragon flew endless circles across their skin. Then the twins added their voices to the music, building upon the pounding beat with their fierce cries. Their lyrics verses of a spell so complex that its meaning escaped all but a few. Like the rising wind that precedes a storm, the elves accompanied the incantation, singing with one tongue and one mind and one intent. Faster and faster they twirled, their feet a dusty blur as they bent and twisted in ways impossible for even the most trained and flexible of humans. Yet despite their almost wild movements and sweat-covered limbs, they remained perfectly in sync, never once breaking the tattoo that flowed between their bodies like a river. On their bodies, the unbroken dragon rippled and quivered, its eyes flashing as if about to come to life any second. Then Saphira and Glader started humming, a deep pulse that vibrated within Naruto's bones and made the very air shimmer. If Naruto were to be completely honest, the whole thing, the dance, music, and flashing dragon tattoo, gave him goosebumps. Especially the way everyone suddenly began to chant a spell he couldn't begin to understand. Even Arya, one of the most level-headed people he ever knew, was caught up in it. Her eyes almost glazed over as words in the ancient language flowed past her pink lips. The whole thing gave him the feeling of a cult, and if instinct served him right, as it usually did, this wasn't over. He wasn't disappointed. When the singing grew to a fever pitch, a blinding flare of light ran the length of the dragon tattoo, from head to tail, and the dragon stirred. Its wings rose and its talons clenched while its red eyes blinked for the first time in centuries. A blaze of fire erupted from the dragon's maw and he lunged forward and pulled himself free of the elf's skin, climbing into the air, where he hovered, flapping his wings. Only the tip of his tail remained connected to Iduna, like a glowing umbilical cord. The giant beast strained toward the black moon and loosed an untamed roar of ages past, then twisted and surveyed the assembled elves. Back down on the ground, Naruto and Kurama stared up at the new dragon in shock. Wasn't expecting that, wish Sai was here to see this, /huh. Wasn't expecting that, looks delicious. Now this wasn't first time he'd seen drawings and paintings come to life, especially when he had Sai as a teammate. But this was different. Although he had seen the abnormally pale man bring his ink drawings to life hundreds, if not thousands of times, they all lacked an important quality this dragon had. Sentience. This dragon, entity, whatever the hell it was no mere construct temporarily given life, but something ancient. Something that allowed itself to be sealed within the caretakers, and called out in times of dire need. Closing his eyes, Naruto opened them again, the cerulean blue now replaced with the silvery purple of the Rinne Sharingan, before exhaling in wonder at the souls in front of him. How could he not? From what he could see, the sisters were in a way Jinchurikis and the dragon their Biju. Yet, to compare the way the dragon's chakra, essence, and soul flawlessly fused with the twin souls in a symphony of colors too beautiful to describe with the barbaric way Biju were imprisoned within their Jinchuriki would be an insult to the highest order. They were the dragon was them, and their hearts beat as one. While Naruto was captivated by the sight, the spectral dragon, which had already grown larger than even Glade, roared and breathed another plume of fire into the sky, before swooping down from the sky in front of Aragon and him. Guided by some instinct, the younger man unconsciously lifted his palm with the silver light as the strange dragon enveloped them both in its insubstantial form. Next to Aragon, Naruto eyed the creature with curiosity as it continued to circle around the two of them, its body hiding them from view, until finally, it stopped, its fangs a mere inch away from their faces. To Aragon, a voice of fire echoed in his mind, "Our gift so you may do what you must." To Naruto, a voice of storms echoed in his mind, "Our gift to the savior of the world and to all others he shall touch." The dragon then touched its snout first to Aragon's silver palm and then to the center of Naruto's head. Fire filled the veins of Aragon as he felt his body struggle to incorporate the new power and make it his own. Beside him, Naruto felt a certain lightness about his body as faint wisps of translucent wind wrapped around his body like a lover. It didn't take long for darkness to claim them as the past few days of near-constant celebration and inebriation with the addition of their newfound power finally took their toll on even Naruto. As they fell to the ground, a voice of fire and wind echoed once again in their minds. "Our gift to you." As the dragon began to vanish, a startled Arya swiftly caught Naruto before he could completely collapse, grunting when she almost dropped him. The man was much heavier than he looked. In a single fluid motion, she draped his arm over her opposite shoulder and hooked her hand around his waist and brought him away from the celebration. On the other side, Saphira did the same with Aragon with her teeth and flew to their own elven residence. Ignoring the occasional odd stares from her fellow elves, Arya effortlessly carried the unconscious blonde across the length of Elesmera to the small house Naruto created earlier. Pushing aside the door, she made sure to carefully step and lift Naruto over the nearly invisible length of tripwire, which she had the most unfortunate experience triggering. It took almost 2 days just to remove the orange paint from her hair. Strung across the doorway. Peering through the shadows, she swept across the floor and past a desk covered in notes with arcane symbols to a moderately sized bed decked out with a blue and orange blanket and pillow. Leaning down, she gently laid Naruto down on his bed. Her task done, Arya turned to go back to the grand celebration that took place once every 100 years. But as she did, some part of her made her hesitate with one hand on the door. Maybe it was her sense of responsibility to make sure Naruto was alright, maybe it was the connection she subconsciously felt but was afraid to acknowledge, or maybe it was for some other reason she refused to acknowledge. Whatever it was enough for her to come back and stand there in silence with a complicated expression in her emerald orbs, quietly observing him. It felt odd to see him so calm and peaceful. Ever since they met all those weeks ago, rarely had Arya seen Naruto not laughing, smiling, pranking, or a combination of all the above, while a seemingly never-ending stream of questions of Allegezia and her people poured out of his mouth. His very presence lit up any room he entered. Yet, despite being the ball of sunshine he was, Arya knew something haunted the blonde. Eyes were windows to the soul, and she had seen, when Naruto thought no one was looking, the pain, guilt, and anger surface in those bright cerulean orbs. He thought he could hide this from everyone. He was wrong. Perhaps he could hide them from Aragon and even some of the longer-lived races, but he couldn't do so from Arya, no matter how brief or well-concealed. After all, how could he, when she saw it every time she gazed in the mirror? As Arya stared at his peaceful face, she reflected, had it not been for the ambush by Durza and his Urgles and her imprisonment at Gilead, it might have been Phelan and her. No. Emerald eyes widened in panic as Arya realized the thought that had silently crept into the corner of her mind. Instantly, the haze from the magical celebration shattered before her eyes. Steel walls as tall as the sky came crashing down in an effort to isolate the memories that threatened to overwhelm her, force her to confront the demons she had banished to the edge of her soul and wrestle away the sanity she so nearly lost all those months ago. Drop by drop, garish red blood dribbled down her chin as pearly teeth bit down. But it was just so difficult. Then he, or rather they, appeared. Squeezing her eyes shut, Arya desperately tried to lock away the memories of the past few months, to forget the man, no monster, who came closest to driving her insane and taking away her dignity. But most of all, to block out the other who came closest to stealing away her heart. To no avail. Like water from a broken dam, the memories of torture at the hands of the sadistic shade Durza burst through her mind, wriggling free as they batted away her weakened defenses with contemptuous ease. Too long did they lurk in the far corners of her mind, festering in the dark, too long were they denied their share of madness, they refused to be denied any longer. Then, as if struck by a warhammer, Arya lurched back, her hips knocking against the desk behind her to send ink and papers crashing to the floor. Back on the bed, Naruto's trembling eyelids threatened to open at the noise. But Arya heard nothing. Phantom knives and unseen whips carved and lashed into her back. The smell of sizzling flesh, her flesh, wafted up her nose as she relived the months the shade had tortured her both mentally and physically, leaving almost no part of her body untouched. For months, he tortured her only respite a mere hour or two to make sure she didn't completely break. Yet, no matter what manner of threats he used, she never caved in. And when her resistance to pain proved too formidable, her willingness to die for the cause too powerful, he threw her to his men to do whatever they wanted. Even after weeks of being free from that disgusting prison, she could still remember their undisguised lust as they all but threw themselves at her. The feeling of their hands as they stripped and pawed at her body, their panting breaths hot against her skin. If not for her impressive mental prowess, she would have been raped by an entire garrison of men. Had she been an ordinary human woman who looked her age, this might have been enough to drive her to reject and hate all men for the rest of her life. But as it were, it was what came next that almost broke her. One by one, visions she tried so hard to suppress of the one man she came to love burst through her mind, battering away weakened defenses forged months ago. Seemingly transported back in time, Arya remembered how they used to wander into the hidden depths of the great dwarf cities, through passages of dark and forgotten stone, lit by glowing lichen growing between cracks in the halls and the flickering of faded magic lanterns. She remembered how they used to discuss everything they could think of underneath the endless sea of twinkling stars and lonely moon. She remembered his small smile, his stormy gray orbs, and the slight crinkle around the corners of his eyes when he laughed. She remembered the faint, jagged scar that ran down his otherwise unblemished cheek to his chest, the result of a shade's lethal blade. She remembered it all. Phelan. Arya slowly closed her eyes as memories, each more precious to her than dragons, played back through her mind before stopping on one. It was of a night a decade ago, when a cold mist rose from the ground and enveloped the ancient pines of the Beer Mountains in an aura of gloom. They were holding hands on a small ridge several miles away from the bustle of the dwarves, their identities as ambassador and guard discarded. It was the first sign of affection she ever showed towards a man. His hand was warm, and his slight smile even warmer. They exchanged no words, content to simply bask in each other's presence until the warm light of the morning dawn broke over the horizon and drove away the chill of night. Despite all the years, she could still remember the way his gray orbs mirrored the night sky as they gazed down at her, the slight tingle on the back of her knuckles when his scarred fingers gently brushed over them, his mild sandalwood scent as she blushed like some silly human maiden from a fairy tale. When Arya peeked to the side, it felt as if Phelan himself was standing right there beside her. Lifting her hand, she reached out to cup his cheek and trace the scar looping down to his chest. But then everything changed. Unnaturally crimson flames roared to life around the two of them, instantly shattering the peace of the night. Yet, even as she began to choke on foul smoke and burning ash, Arya paid no attention as right before her despairing eyes an Urgal arrow, its shaft and fletching as black as a starless night, suddenly flew over her shoulder and pierced through his arms and chest, splattering hot blood and gore across her face. Blood bubbled from the side of Phelan's mouth as his eyes, once full of love and sweet tenderness, filled with disbelief before going dull as the life faded from them. His hands grew cold and rigid, tightly grasping onto her own even as he collapsed, his ragged gasps disturbing her raven locks as he struggled to whisper his dying words, only to cough up more blood before ceasing to breathe. Unbeknownst to her, Naruto's eyes snapped open at the nearby surge of distress and immediately tracked it back to its source. Arya? Enough, that's enough. Deaf to everything else, Arya nearly screamed out as she clutched her head in agony before desperately uttering a forbidden spell to temporarily banish the images of Phelan, of Gilead, of Durza back to oblivion. With a harrowing howl, the memories struggled against the spell's pull, ravaging and leaving deep trenches in her mind as they lashed out. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead as she fought for supremacy, her iron will against raging insanity. Much to her relief, she managed to once again drive off her darkness and seal it behind layers of steel walls. Gasping, she clutched at the desk behind her for support. There was a reason why the use of the spell was restricted. For every use, the targeted trauma would grow worse and worse until the user either managed to come to terms with it, or be overwhelmed and possibly cause irreparable damage to her mind. Most could only use the spell 3 times a year before going mad. This was already the 4th time in less than half a year. That's enough for tonight. Her knees weak from exhaustion, Arya's shoulders slumped as the remaining effects of the Agiti Blodrin dissipated. Lifting a hand up to her mouth, she muttered Ways Heil to heal the small cut on her mouth. Then, without a second thought, she turned away towards the door, each step dragging across the floor as if tied to a heavy weight. For her, the celebration that occurred every 100 years was done. Now, all she wanted was some peace and quiet and fully recover her composure. To forget this all happened. But before she could take a step, a hand abruptly clamped down on her wrist. Wait. Freezing in place, Arya felt her heart painfully lurch when she turned to see Naruto sitting up. When did he awake? A concerned look on his face, before forcibly stilling it. It didn't take a genius to know why he stopped her. Release me. Eyes cold, she tried to jerk her hand from Naruto's, and much to her surprise, succeeded. Rubbing her wrist, she glanced at the blonde in confusion. If there was anything Arya could confidently say about Naruto, it was that nothing could make the blonde give up. So for him to so easily do so was strange to say the least. Arya, if you don't want to talk, I won't force you to. But, noticing her confusion, Naruto shrugged before gesturing towards a chair next to his bed. If you just give me a chance, I can help you. He gazed up at her, his nose slightly twitching at the faint scent of fresh pine needles. I promise. Peering into Naruto's eyes, Arya eventually bowed her head. I appreciate the offer, but it is late and there is much to do tomorrow. Good night, Naruto. With that, she headed towards the door. Yet, as she once again placed her hand on the door, for the second time that night, she hesitated. Initially, Arya wanted nothing more than to turn down his offer and simply walk away, to shun away his words like she did with everyone else's, even her own mother's. Yet, a part of her knew she couldn't keep running away from her problems. She was already towing the line when it came to using that forbidden spell, and the next time she was forced to use it, she might not be as lucky. And while she didn't fear death or insanity, the war still needed her and her skills. If talking to Naruto can help me, then I should take the chance. Arya clenched her fist as she made a decision. Turning away from the entrance, she made her way back to the proffered chair and sat on it. Naruto smiled when he saw Arya accept his offer. Touching a seal on his left arm, he unsealed a wooden plate with a flask of warmed sake and 2 small cups. After pouring the sake into the cups, he lifted the cup closest to him to his lips before tossing his head back. Grabbing the flask again, he proceeded to repeat his actions. For several seconds, other than the soft sound of their breathing and the gentle clink of ceramic on wood, neither made a sound as they continued to gaze at each other, azure staring into emerald. Idly, as the pungent odor of the sake permeated the room, she wondered just how much liquor was in the flask. The amount Naruto already drank should have long exceeded the volume contained within such a small vessel. Finally, just as Arya was growing restless, Naruto placed his cup down with a sigh. "I had a wife, you know." Arya froze in surprise. Out of everything Naruto could have said, this was the least expected. And it was no wonder, despite his sunny and affable personality, he was rather secretive when he wanted to be. Not once did he touch on his personal life during all their talks about the elemental nations, whether it be politics, the nature of chakra, to even the difference between jutsu and spells. And the elf never asked, because she understood that no matter how hotly her innate curiosity burned, it simply wasn't her place to dig into his past. Perhaps, no one was, after all, she was merely a stranger from another continent, another culture, one he barely knew for 2 months after sporadic bursts of conversation. Other than being warriors for their respective races, there was nothing that compelled him to open up to either of them. So when she had the rare chance to know more of the elusive blonde, she took it. Within the seal on Naruto's stomach, a pair of crimson eyes creaked open in the darkness, a complicated gleam on their surface. Peering up, Kurama watched the clouds grow gray and heavy as his host's mood reflected the inner state of his mind. Out of all of Naruto's memories, both conscious and unconscious, the giant fox knew this, and the time the Uchiha and Loud Pinky died, were the worst. Something broke inside him that day, and remained so until now. It nearly drove him mad, and had it not been for the fox forcibly dragging the blonde's mind into their shared mindscape, perhaps the landmass making up the elemental nations or even the planet itself might have been torn in two, ground to cosmic dust in his brief, but terrifying bout of raging insanity. And even then, Kurama had to restrain Naruto with all 10 tails, and several of his largest Bijadamas, just to prevent him from destroying his own mind as it strained and cracked under his fearful wrath. It's a good thing he didn't remember he could simply twist me into pretzels in his mindscape. Ugh, my tails still ache after that brat almost ripped them out by the roots. Kurama winced at that particularly painful memory, still shivering upon remembering what exactly a no-holds-barred, pissed-off Naruto could do, even if he did regain his senses after merely a minute or two. Peering up at the gathering clouds, the Juubi grimaced before puffing a blast of air into the atmosphere, instantly clearing up the sky. Brat, I truly hope this does you good. This was one injury even he, the greatest and most magnificent of beings, could not begin to heal. Only love, as much as he hated to admit it, could mend his friend. Settling back down on his haunches, Kurama laid his head between his front legs, his giant form fading away from sight to give the two some privacy. Seeing Arya calm down, Naruto quietly refilled his cup. Wincing as the toad-brewed liquor burned its way to his stomach, he took a deep breath. Her name. His breath hitched before he could say her name, the bedsheets crumpling under a clenched fist. It would be the first time he mentioned her name in many years to someone other than the beast in his belly, and would open a door he long kept under lock and key. Closing his eyes, he took several halting breaths before rasping out, was Hinata Hyuga, eldest daughter of the Hyuga clan, Chunin of Konoha, and my wife for over 50 years. A hushed breeze brushed through the room, shifting the tips of his spiky saffron hair. The gate now broken, words for the woman who showed him what love was poured out of his mouth like water from a broken dam for the first time in over 3 decades. And so Arya listened, breathing as quietly as possible, afraid the smallest sound would break the spell that compelled Naruto to speak of his past lover. Watching his cerulean orbs grow misty with the weight of old memories, as his voice at first trembled before steadying, her heart trembled in empathy. She could tell, feel, just how much the man in front of her loved his wife, from the painstaking details to the tone he used to describe her. The very night seemed to brighten as the blonde shinobi smiled and laughed while describing her fair features and how cute and awkward she was when they were little. His sapphire orbs danced with a joy she'd never seen when he remembered the day they became husband and wife. His friends and comrades, nay, family, from all over the elemental nations surrounded them to celebrate the happiest day of his life. He could still smell the heady fragrance of lilies and lavender from her silky locks invade his senses as they kissed, the heat from her blushing pink cheeks as Kiba and a few others whistled in congratulations for the new couple, much to her chagrin. She always was a shy one. He could still remember how Hinata insisted they turn off all the lights before they made love for the first time, and even then, almost fainted the moment she touched his manhood. But as Naruto rambled on, the shadows creeped back when he recalled how he neglected her over the years and how she inevitably aged as the years passed by, her luscious, dark indigo hair now streaked with silver, shallow wrinkles along the corners of her eyes, her full figure, frail and withered, while he remained young, but diminished all the same as life clung to him like a disease. The joy, the sorrow, the rich depth of emotions in his voice and on his face made Arya understand a certain point. He wasn't born immortal. When did he realize he was immortal, was a question Arya always had, but never asked. Ever since Naruto showed images of his life back during the meeting after the battle under Farthendur. And from what he told her after that meeting, she wondered whether he knew since the day he could walk, or when he came to maturity. But now, there was no doubt in her mind. Naruto found out later, and much later at that, it was obvious from the love, the tenderness, the regret, and the grief that resounded from his words. For elves and dragon riders, the only beings in Alagaesia other than the dragons blessed with eternal life, it was rare for one of them to hold such passion towards another, especially in the first 100 years of life, a trait she found unique in the shortest-lived species, humans. Only they, who jealously seized each and every day, whose lives burned the shortest, yet the most brilliantly, could hold such vibrant and volatile emotions. It was a precious gift that surpassed any amount of gold or precious metals which all immortals and those who lived long lives both envied and cherished, no matter they be joyful or depressing, a gift most reluctantly shared to any but those closest to them. A gift Naruto gave for no reason other than to help her overcome her own traumas, someone he hardly knew. And so, with every word, a twisted knot within her started to slowly unravel as she quietly listened. Then a shiver ran up her spine when Naruto's normally clear blue eyes turned almost frighteningly blank as he recalled his wife's final moments. It wasn't as if she'd never seen the expression, far from it. On the contrary, she'd seen that same expression far too many times on some soldiers or even survivors from a raided village. But it unnerved her to see Naruto, the invincible man capable facing down a small city's worth of bloodthirsty Urgles and a shade without a scratch, so vulnerable. And though she would never admit it, it pained her on a deeper level to witness that expression on the man she found more cheerful, more alive than anyone she ever met. Rubbing her arms, Arya held herself close for some much-needed warmth and comfort as the night grew cold. Even as she was dying, even as she fought for every breath, all she could think of was how to comfort me. She begged me to not make her my anchor. But how could I not? She was my sun and moon. She was. His voice broke. Everything to me. Not noticing the tears that traced down his scarred cheeks, Naruto peered over Arya's shoulder to the moon outside, lost in its cold, distant beauty. Finally, he managed to croak out, then she passed away. Tilting his head back, he swallowed another shot of sake, unwilling to go any further. A deafening silence filled the small hut as the two sat there, one in bed and the other on a chair. They were different. Man and elf. Fire and ice elemental nations and Alagaesia. Two broken people who never should have met, or even shared the same room. And yet here they were, mere inches from each other, linked by a pain few could understand. Coming back to his senses, Naruto blinked, as if surprised by the tears on his cheeks, before wiping them away. Well, this is embarrassing. Didn't know I could still cry. Naruto murmured as he rubbed his eyes dry, cheeks slightly red from his unseemly display. It had been years, if not decades, since he last shed tears. The last time he did, it was when his old teammates passed away. He glanced back at Arya. I won't ask who you lost, he started softly, calm blue eyes trained on green as she flinched at his words, but as a friend who has fought and traveled with you, I only hope my past helps you heal in some way. And remember, a bright, yet sad, smile appeared on his face as he echoed the words the elf told him 2 months ago. You will always have someone to turn to in me. When he saw Arya remain unresponsive, Naruto helplessly sighed. If she didn't want to talk, then so be it. When it came to situations like this, he long learned forcing the other to talk was one of, if not, the worst thing to do. Shaking his head, he reached out towards his drinking set. We were ambushed. Surprised, Naruto flicked his gaze back towards Arya, who turned her gaze down at the wooden floor, locks of midnight shielding her face. For a second, she paused, as if shocked by the words that came out of her full lips. Another second passed as signs of struggle. With a smooth motion, she snatched the unclaimed cup before cradling it in the palm of her hands. Staring down at her rippling reflection, Arya took a small sip, coughing slightly. Liquid fire burned down her throat. Lowering her hand, she spoke quietly, like a specter whispering in his ear. 6 months ago, my companions, Glenwing and Phelan, and I were riding through the night, transporting Saphira's egg back to Elesmera from Farthen-Dur along one of the secret paths known to only us elves. And for 20 years, this was true. Arya took a shuddering breath as she tightly clutched the cup, uncaring of the small cracks spreading across its polished exterior. Glenwing was the first to die. An arrow, enchanted by some dark magic, bypassed his wards and pierced his head, instantly killing him. It was only then we were alerted to the faint outlines of Urgles behind the trees of our forest. Had it just been them, Phelan and I would have been more than enough. But there was another. Her eyes reddened with rage as she spat out the name of the thing that still haunted her every waking thought, even if he was dead. Durza. Naruto, who had been quietly listening, twitched, stunned by the seething hatred accompanying the word. It never occurred to him, he, who had the ability to sense negative emotions, that hidden underneath Arya's calm and sometimes even icy exterior raged a blazing passion, capable of melting steel, for the Arya he knew would never be able to erupt with such fury. Opposite of him, the elf's breaths quickened as she glared at her fractured cup. We were caught completely by surprise. A red light flashed towards my steed, killing it instantly and forcing me to jump and land against a tree. I was concussed as more arrows flew towards us, followed by another, and then another. With his sword, Phelan stood in front of me, deflecting any arrows from reaching us. However, I knew it was only a matter of time before he made a mistake, whether it be by accident or weariness. Arya closed her eyes, hands clenching as she murmured, it was only a matter of time. Crack! The fragile cup within her hands finally couldn't take it anymore and shattered into a myriad of pieces, several jagged fragments tearing open the soft flesh of her calloused palm to the bone. Drip, drip, drip. Tears joined by blood, steadily dripped to the floor as Arya, once again lost in her memories that seeped past her barriers as most elves were prone to do, dully stared at the lacerations on her delicate hands, numb to the horrible sight of her mangled hand and the pain lancing up her arm. Gripping a splinter lodged in her thumb, she ripped it out, uncaring of the sickening squelch or the spattering of blood on her armor, and dropped it to the floor. Watching the piece of porcelain fragment into even smaller pieces, she continued on, muscles tensed and eyes blank. To make sure I was all right, Phelan turned towards me for but a second. But it cost him. 3 arrows struck him. 2 through his arms and the other his heart. And as he fell, as the light left his eyes, his last word was my name. Ridicule and guilt tarnished Arya's song-like voice as the memory of her failure and Phelan's death consumed her. Her fists clenched and drove the splinters even deeper, the already harsh pain continuing to escalate until she could feel nothing else. Yet even as agony consumed her hands, Arya remained indifferent towards the pain, almost reveling in it, as if by doing so she could somehow atone for his death. Yet, before she could tighten her hold even further, a bandaged hand wreathed in golden flames reached out and lightly grasped her hand. Startled, she tried to pull away, only to groan in unexpected bliss when a comforting warmth inundated her body. The wounds on her hand sewing shut as the final shards dropped to the floor with crystalline tinkles. Under the young half of the 6 paths, her muscles, as taut as drawn bowstrings, slowly relaxed while unknown to her. The dark thoughts that plagued her for the past months melted under the godly Chakra's light. It felt as if she were soaking in a hot bath for her body and soul. And so, as she basked in the glorious sensation, for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, Arya finally felt at peace. Even though she knew it was fleeting, she felt as if a huge burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Glancing up, a faint blush colored her cheeks as she gazed into twin oceans filled with warmth, compassion, and understanding. No longer did Arya try to fight against Naruto's grip, instead choosing to flip her hand to better hold his. Opposite of her, Naruto waited several seconds before saying in a soft voice, "You loved Phelan." Arya hesitated for an instant before slowly nodding. Phelan was decades older than me. But despite the age gap, we were kindred spirits. We agreed on almost everything, and within those 20 years of transporting Saphira's egg, we grew close. Can you understand that? She stared into Naruto's eyes and saw he did. For over 20 years, we were the only immortals to walk among the other short-lived races. We had only each other, for only we could understand each other as no other race could possibly understand eternity as us elves. How could they with their short lives? For those 20 years, Phelan was my rock, my friend and companion, and if there was more time, possibly even my lover. But it was not to be after that night. Arya finished, tightly grasping Naruto's hand as she drew strength from him. Smiling at the display, Naruto continued to channel his power through his limb. He sounded like a good man. He was a good man. Arya sharply corrected before sighing. But what does it matter? He's dead, I killed him. It wasn't your fault. Jerking her head up, Arya frowned at Naruto's words, disbelief coloring her tone as the warmth granted by the blonde dissipated in a second. Her previous negative emotions returned full force. Not my fault. How is it not my fault? If only I paid more attention to our surroundings, we might have survived the ambush. If only I wasn't so weak, Glenwing wouldn't have died. Phelan wouldn't have died. Her eyes blazed emerald green as she roared out the words that had been hidden within her the whole time. Suddenly, the scent of crushed pine needles filled the air. She didn't mean to yell at Naruto. If anything, she was honored he told her about his wife and more than appreciated the warmth he shared with her just moments ago. But she couldn't help it. The remaining traces of the Agiti Blodrin and resulting exhaustion from not resting in the past several days combined with her highly unstable mental state from pouring out her darkest memories already strained her exceptional composure. His words were merely what finally broke the fragile balance. Tugging her hand out of Naruto's, Arya wrapped her arms around herself as she hoarsely uttered, "I should have been the one to dash." Stop. A figure cloaked in the silver light of the moon rushed forward from the bed to the sitting elf. His kimono askew, Naruto ignored his indecent state of dress in favor of hugging the rambling elf in his arms. Recoiling from his touch, Arya struggled like a wild beast trapped in a cage as she pounded her fists, elbows, and legs against his unyielding frame. Stop it. Let go of me. Let go. He didn't, knowing to do so would be the worst thing he could possibly do at this time. For all her strength, she might as well be trying to drain the ocean with a broken cup. But despite this, it was near impossible to keep Arya from wriggling out of his grasp without accidentally hurting her, either from his ridiculously sturdy body or the force required to hold her. And so, without another thought, he manipulated his chakra in the areas she struck and softened himself up to a level where she wouldn't hurt herself. Doing so had its price, however. It left his body frail like wood without water. While not life-threatening, the act itself was agonizing, and Naruto did it without an ounce of hesitation. He knew Arya needed to vent now, or maybe one day she might just lose her life, either on the battlefield, or by her own hand. Once he did so, he felt a groan whoosh past his teeth as he was slammed against a nearby wall, causing the room to shake. Had it been made out of ordinary wood, the wall might have collapsed then and there. As his back touched the wall, Naruto tightened his embrace and brought her closer. Without batting an eye, he took the full brunt of her blows, unflinching as he swiftly accumulated dozens of bruises, unwavering when several ribs cracked. Instead, through the storm of attacks, he brought her head to rest against his shoulder, rocking her back and forth as he would a child and cooed in her pointed ears even as she continued to rain down blows all about him. There, it's all right, SH, just let it all out. Had she been in her right mind, Arya would have been mortified merely at the fact she was being treated as if she were a month-old babe, never mind breaking down so completely in front of him. Yet, as the seconds passed, something changed. Her strikes, each more than capable of breaking a man, slowly grew weaker and fewer in number until finally, after a feeble punch to his chest, her arms powerlessly dropped to her side. She panted, eyes red as tears leaked out down her chin, soaking his kimono. Time stood still as the two leaned against the wall, one on top of the other with only an inch or two between them. Other than the faint rustling of swaying leaves, neither made a sound until Arya, face still buried in the crook Naruto's neck, whispered, her voice muffled. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just miss him so damn much." Rubbing the small of her back, Naruto muttered back, "I know." Grasping her narrow shoulders, he gently tilted her chin until they saw eye to eye, sapphire boring into emerald. "I know." Then he sighed. "But you cannot, keep blaming yourself." Contrary to before, Arya held herself silent, letting only a few words slip past her lips. How do you do it?" Tightly gripping the edge of his kimono, she clutched at her heart, the pain of losing Phelan still fresh as the day he died. After losing him, every passing second became a burden, each moment an eternity. Had it not been for her elvish mentality in her responsibility to see this war which took so much from her to the end, perhaps she would be like the Manoa tree, passing the days listlessly until Father Time inevitably put her back together. Indeed, how did I do it? Taking a long minute to search for the answer deep inside of him, Naruto took a deep breath before quietly answering, sometimes, we make mistakes. We all do, it's inevitable. No matter how powerful we may be or how long our lifespan, human or elf, we're not gods. And so we all have regrets and times we wish we could go back and do over again. And at that crossroad, we have a choice, to dwell in the past, always wishing we could do something different, or go forth into the future and live for those who cannot. His voice grew stronger as a hint of resolution entered his eyes. I chose the future. Staring down at the beautiful face just inches away, Naruto lowered a hand and gently gripped the one near his chest. I realized long ago that wishing won't do anything. All it does is distract us from what's really there, from the good which still could be. I don't know about you, but I refuse to insult all those who gave their lives so I could live. But most of all, I refuse to let my friends and wife in the afterlife watch me wallow in despair when there is still so much I can still do. Naruto tightly clasped his other hand around Arya's shoulder. You have already done so much for Allegezia and protected Saphira against impossible circumstances, yet you still do not see. Without you, Aragon would still be a farm boy, ignorant of the real world. Without you, Saphira would have been recaptured and forced to endure the years alone. You have done nothing wrong. So hold your head up high with pride, and live. Live for Glenwing, live for Phelan, but most of all, live for yourself and your future. His words were like a balm to the stunned elf as a scorching heat washed away the last vestiges of her doubts and self-pity. It was as if a wind blew away the dark clouds to reveal the clear blue of the sky. What have I been doing this whole time? Have I truly been wasting Glenwing's and Phelan's sacrifice? No more. Looking down, her hands clenched as she made a silent pact with herself, a silent vow to never again fall into despair and forever honor all those who died for her before looking back up at twin spheres of azure. To think I would be taught such a lesson by someone younger than myself. Glancing away, Arya covered her face with her palm as she quietly chuckled. Barzel, you must think me pathetic. Nah. You should have seen me 31 years ago. Kami, I was a mess. Chuckling in return, Naruto patted Arya's shoulder with his bandaged hand. The two stared each other in the eye before bursting out into laughter. They couldn't help it. Here they were, two beings over a century old, behaving little better than a pair of adolescent teenagers after pouring out their hearts to each other. It was almost comical. Eventually their laughter died down to little more than tiny gasps, until even that faded to silence. Several moments passed as the two stood there, each content to pass the time in each other's arms. Until the trilling chirp of an early morning bird interrupted them. The tips of Arya's ears twitched and her eyes shot open at the unexpected sound as she instinctively tried to unsheath her non-existent sword, only to find her hand still gripped by Naruto's. Soon, a brilliant blush slowly crept up her neck as what just happened in the past hour or so came crashing down on her, with the force of a falling mountain. Swiftly composing herself, Arya forced her blush down. Do you mind? She softly asked while gently tugging at her trapped hand. Ah, my bad. Realizing what Arya meant, Naruto quickly let go, oblivious of the almost disappointed pout on her lips as the source of that sweet heat pulled away. Her hand freed, Arya reluctantly stepped away his arms before whirling towards the door. However, As she was about to step through the open door, she paused, her back straight and strong, the new dawn shrouding her figure in a scintillating array of red, orange, and yellow. For a minute, she stood still, the morning breeze playfully whisking several strands of her midnight black hair. Just as Naruto was about to ask what was wrong, words stuck in his throat when Arya abruptly turned around, a dazzling smile framed by cheeks of rosy red. "Thank you, Naruto." Not waiting for an answer, Arya left with elegant and long strides, unaware of the effect she had on the stunned blonde. Heart beating a million miles an hour, Naruto continued to stare at her retreating frame until she disappeared, swallowed up by the forest. Making his way back to his bed, Naruto plopped down, hand over his eyes. But nothing could hide his beaming grin. "Huh, so she can smile like that." A helpless chortle escaped his lips. "Well, that's just not fair." Touching his cheeks, he found them a little heated. Chapter 20, Chakra Awakening. Naruto woke up to the sound of knocking, already knowing who was at the door. Quickly cleaning and dressing, Naruto walked towards the door and opened it to reveal Arya, who appeared far more relaxed than usual. "Good morning, Naruto." Arya greeted, dipping her head as Naruto greeted her back. "So, shall we continue your lessons in magic?" To her surprise, Naruto shook his head. "Actually, I was thinking of training you and Aragon how to use chakra." While he quietly chuckled at the look of disbelief on her face, he could understand her shock. To the spellcasters and sorcerers of Allegezia, the ability to use and shape the chakra hidden behind the first of the 8 gates without needing years, or even decades of the study in a nearly lost language was a fever dream, deeply desired, but completely impossible. To have the opportunity to learn such a skill, no magic user in all the land could resist such temptation, least of all the elves who valued knowledge above all else. And his decision didn't come easy. Last night, after Arya left, he had taken an entire day in his time-accelerated Kamui dimension to come to a decision whether to pass on the arts of the shinobi, techniques which some would argue in the end gave birth to the great shinobi wars of the elemental nations. This alone spoke of the responsibility required to wield such power, and while he didn't believe either Arya or Aragon to be the type of people to abuse said power, much thought had to be put into this decision. So when Naruto saw and felt her hesitation, he felt a small surge of gratification of having his small hypothesis proven correct. He didn't need his negative emotion sensing to know while Arya deeply desired his knowledge, she was genuinely reluctant and even loath to ask for something not hers. He warmly smiled. "After all, we already spilled our hearts to each other last night, and Aragon will need all the help he can get. What's giving the two of you the skills of my people compared to that?" For a moment, Arya's breathing hitched. After years of being an ambassador for the elves, little was able to faze her, let alone render her speechless. But this was like the dwarves revealing their smithing methods to the humans, or the elves their knowledge of the ancient language. These were secrets capable of uplifting a race, or establishing dominance over the continent. The value of such knowledge was simply put, priceless. For him to do this just to help them. Arya stared into Naruto's blue eyes. "Are you certain of this, Naruto?" "Yes," replied Naruto. "Then, I swear to never reveal your secrets, not even if my mother asks this of me." Tracing her slender fingers along the pommel of her sword, Arya bowed her head and swore to Naruto in the ancient language. "Besides, I think I'm going to have fun training you, he. Naruto said as Arya immediately replaced her blush in favor of a pale tone that only grew paler with each of the blonde's laugh. 2 weeks later. As it turned out, Arya's experience with magic made it rather easy for her to awaken her chakra. As she did so, she managed to bring her chakra under control and stop it from constantly leaking from her chakra pathways and into her muscles. However, due to her constant training in magic, her chakra reserves, when finally awakened, exploded, hence absolutely killing the chakra control that most females had. Naruto noted how what was merely mid-chunin chakra reserves, increased dramatically to around low jonin reserves, which he found impressive since the last time he saw such chakra was from a centuries-old elf. As such, when it came to learning the tree walk, Naruto soon learned to be ready to dodge when Arya kept making the trees under her feet explode. However, when she realized that only more trees would die if she did not learn fast enough, she quickly learned how to tree walk before moving on to water walking. After 2 weeks Naruto started teaching her, she still had trouble with the basic shinobi exercise. However, training was not the activity the two did as time passed. Ever since sharing some of their most painful memories after that night, Both Naruto and Arya felt a sense of trust towards the other that towed the line beyond mere friendship. Had it not been for the enchanted fail nerve and beguiling spells woven about the Manoa tree, their conversation 2 weeks wouldn't have happened. Both simply were not the most open of people. For Arya it was partially her nature and time as an ambassador for the resistance, while for Naruto, despite being a naturally sincere person, his shinobi training and experience as the Hokage took priority. Yet for some reason, they felt drawn to each other, like the two opposite ends of a magnet. Flashback. Arya walked on top of a pool of water, but within a few seconds started shaking before falling through the surface. As she did, she jumped up to the shore from the bottom and instantly dried herself with a quick spell. She walked over to where her man, funny, when did she start to think that, was sitting at the base of a tree while reading a book from the same library where the elves stored Aragon's work. She watched as he occasionally flinched in mild annoyance as the clones he left in the library dispelled to send everything they had read to their creator. Ever since discovering the usage of such a jutsu, she was still getting used to that word. Arya immediately made the blonde teach it to her. He did, but warned to never use without him nearby for now, since her control over her chakra was still not good enough. She could easily send too much chakra into her clones and thus die from chakra exhaustion. When she reached Naruto, she sat down next to the blonde and enjoyed the beauty of the forest in silence together. As they sat there looking into the forest of the Weldenvarden, Arya asked a question she had for quite a while but never before thought she had the right to ask. Naruto, I have always wondered, ever since the Battle of Farthen-Dur, why did you not just quickly end the war with your enormous power that has no rival on this continent? Naruto placed his book down on his lap and then looked at her. Arya, tell me, do you know of the story about the beggar and the fisherman? Arya shook her head. She never heard of such a strange tale in all her years of wandering throughout the continent. No. Then let me tell you the gist of it. There were once 2 fishermen who were coming back with their catch. A beggar by the side of the road begged for a fish. One of the fishermen gave a fish to the beggar. From that day on, the beggar merely sat there, waiting for the fisherman to pass him by as he grew lazy and fat until one day, the other fisherman stopped the supply of fish. Immediately the beggar flew into a horrible rage, having gotten used to the right of getting a fish. Yet, instead of yielding to the beggar's demands, that second fisherman taught the beggar how to make his fishing rod and then how to fish. Within a day, the beggar was able to catch his own food without ever having to ask the 2 fishermen for fish. Arya sat there, thinking over the story that the blonde had just told her. It was a simple tale, but all the more meaningful because of its conciseness. Are you saying, that if you intervened, the people of the Empire and the Varden would merely rely on you to solve their problems? Yes, however, there is a more important reason for not doing so. What do you think would happen if I, a foreigner, suddenly stormed Galbatorix's castle and then killed him? Arya thought about it before widening her eyes. The Varden would appear to the common people of the Empire as someone who relied on a foreigner not even from the continent. Plus, killing Galbatorix is not our only goal, but to also one day make the Empire a better place by placing a just king over it while re-establishing the Dragon Riders to maintain peace. If you had just killed him, the Empire would have simply elected someone from their corrupt circle of politicians, who would most likely continue the war and the deaths of thousands of its citizens. Naruto blinked, having not thought about the first reason. Yes, that's exactly what I meant. But there is, never mind, you're right. Almost letting slip the situation of Kaguya, he quickly shut his mouth as he opted for a thin smile, hoping his little mislip would go unnoticed. It didn't. Narrowing her eyes, Arya suspiciously stared at the blonde, who continued to smile. That was not a smile. In the end she didn't say anything. She understood that while they were friends, there were still secrets too personal for either of them to share. Then why do I feel so disappointed then? Frowning at the errant thought, the elf quickly squashed the thought to paste as she gently laid a hand on Naruto's shoulder in comfort. It's obvious there is another reason for you not killing Galbatorix other than for us, and I know we are only friends. Arya watched as his smile began to slowly fade. So you don't need to tell me anything if you don't want to. But I am here if you ever want to talk. Rapidly blinking, Naruto gazed at her stunning emeralds for eyes before abruptly laughing. I was that obvious, huh? Even after all these years, I still suck at lying to my friends. Initially shocked by the shinobi's sudden outburst, Arya couldn't help but quietly chuckle along, the 2 friends' laughter twisting through the trees of the ancient forest. Flashback end. Naruto sat next to the Manoa tree, meditating while purifying the nature chakra flowing through the tree as he thought about the changes that had happened ever since the Agiti Blodron. First of all was about Aragon. Whatever that dragon from the twins did, it basically converted Aragon into an elf while retaining a few human attributes, like being able to grow a beard. He now had much more substantial chakra pathways that automatically leaked chakra into his muscles, strengthening them beyond normal human limits. With that came a large boost in magical reserves. He thought about what happened to Arya and him. He smiled at the memories that brought them much closer. Then he thought about the new powers that same dragon gave him. When he went to jump onto a tree to begin tree-hopping to Oromisa's cabin, he completely overshot the tree and ended up somehow floating in the air. At first, he was freaked out about this before realizing that this was one of the two gifts the dragon had given him, the gift of flight without having to go into his Rakuto Sennin mode. His thoughts were interrupted when he suddenly felt death envelop an area of the forest, as all of the living beings within that area ceased to live. In his Sage Mode Level 2, his connection to the living beings within his area increased drastically, and while it did not bother him if they died, that was only if he steeled himself for the sensation. That came from the direction of Oromisa's cabin. Just what happened? Naruto thought as he started sunshining in that direction. Chapter 21, Leaving the Elves. Aragon watched in horror as his spell drew on the life energy of the surrounding animals. He felt death as a line of ants keeled over motionless, a baby mouse gasped and entered the void as it lost the strength to keep its heart beating, and countless plants withered and crumbled to dust. He whirled on Oromiz and in anger, growling at him. You knew this would happen. Oromiz smiled sadly before saying, it was necessary. You had to understand the terrible price of wielding such power. Words cannot describe such a feeling. You had to experience the pain as the minds you shared a connection to, died because of you. Before anyone could say anything more, a yellow blur landed next to them. Was that you, Aragon, Oromiz? Were you the ones responsible for that wave of death I felt while I was by the Manoa tree? Answer carefully, or I may change my opinion of the both of you. Naruto asked with narrowed eyes. Oromiz looked at the blonde before sighing. That was me teaching Aragon how to create spells without using the energy within his own body, but rather from the bodies around us. This was meant as a lesson to him to never take energy from those who cannot sustain such a loss. Naruto looked at the both of them, trying to see any signs of deceit, but only saw regret and sorrow in both of their eyes. His stance relaxed as he said, so you have started teaching him how to use energy that is not his own, so you can take energy from any source that is living within your vicinity? Naruto asked as Aragon nodded, looking at the blonde in confusion as he wondered where he was going with this. Then try taking it from me. Now. Aragon's eyes widened at what his friend was saying. No, I couldn't. You could potentially die if I draw too much from you. Aragon said, remembering the feeling of death just a few moments ago. Naruto snorted in amusement. Don't worry about that. While coming here, I was able to hear Oromiz saying something about drawing energy from beings that could take it. And let me assure you, no matter how much you draw, it won't be anywhere enough to drain me. Now, do it, Naruto said with his Hokage's voice, as Aragon immediately snapped to attention and started drawing. Aragon gasped as he, for the first time, felt the blonde's life and energy amount. It was astonishing, beautiful, and terrifying that such an amount could live within a single body. By the dwarven and human gods, just how much energy does Naruto have? It feels as if not even the whole of the Du Veldenwarden could compare to such an amount. Similar thoughts were running through Oromiza's head as he felt out his savior's energy, except without any fear due to knowing that they had nothing to fear from the blonde. Naruto stood there without wavering as he felt an extremely slight drain on his reserves. It's just like establishing a temporary bond between the user and the energy source, much like a Jinchuriki's bond. How fascinating. Actually, it's just like my Preta path, just much weaker, but no need for contact. Naruto had to knock on Aragon's head as the dragon rider started getting lost and absorbing more energy than he could manage. Hey, Aragon. Stop absorbing or else you'll explode from absorbing too much energy. Aragon immediately stopped as he felt his mind bursting at the seams from the absorbed energy. Before potentially exploding, he immediately sent that energy into a spell that formed gigantic green energy ball before sending it away into the forest where a large explosion rang out and blasting a crater a dozen feet in diameter. Oromiz, do you believe that this is the final stage of energy absorption? Naruto asked. Oromiz startled, having never thought about that. Well, yes. Unless you mean being able to absorb energy directly from energy sources like fire, sunlight, or other forces of nature. That is simply impossible as we are not strong enough to take away their energy. And that is where you are wrong, Oromiz. Despite living with nature so long, you have forgotten that you live with nature, rather than take from it. Why can't you do the same with the Earth's energy? Rather than take it, let it enter you as does with every other living thing on this earth. Watch, Naruto said as he started to slowly absorb nature chakra from the surroundings, circular markings appearing on his face as he entered Sage Mode Level 2. Oromiz and Aragon in the meantime looked in astonishment at the synchronism between the blonde and the surrounding nature itself. That's when the surrounding animals started emerging from their habitats and started surrounding the blonde, with some even climbing on top of him. Amazing, to think there was such a method of not taking energy from nature, but simply sharing it. Just who could have taught him such a thing? Oromiz wondered out loud. Actually, the ones who taught me this, Sage Mode, were sentient toads, he. Naruto said while scratching the back of his head as the two riders just looked at him as if he was crazy. Anyways, Aragon and Oromiz. While I cannot teach you this Sage Mode, mainly because you do not have large enough reserves of energy or the required control, I can allow you to draw on my own energy when you need it. Before you protest, just know that I have far more energy than all of the living beings in this forest combined. So, if you think that even this forest is not enough, then don't do it. Naruto said cheekily. The two riders looked at each other before just sighing, accepting the blonde's proposal. 1 week later, Aragon prepared his supplies as he started to run towards the rest of his group as they prepared to leave Elesmera, having just found out that the Varden was about to be involved with an imminent battle. Before he could meet with his group, Oromiz flew down from the sky on Glade and landed in front of Aragon. As they looked at each other, Aragon asked, "Why did you hide the truth from us? Are you so determined to keep us here that you must resort to such underhand trickery? The Varden are about to be attacked and you didn't even mention it." Oromiz sighed before answer. The main reason is because we ourselves only discovered this a mere week ago. And if you had not noticed, Queen Islanzati has called out to all of the elves in Du Weldenvarden. The very forests are filled with the ring of hammers, the trampling of armored boots, and the grief of those who are about to be parted. For the first time in a century, our race is set to emerge from Du Weldenvarden and challenge our greatest foe. The time has come for elves to once more walk openly in Allegezia. As Aragon looked down in shame for even thinking that Oromiz had betrayed him, Oromiz began again. Another reason is because your own training is not complete yet. We could not risk you potentially dying in battle before you were completely ready. What if Galbatorix happens to appear in the battle? Naruto cannot always be there, even if he wants to. So at that time, you will be facing him alone, with only your and Saphira's skills behind you. Aragon nodded, now understanding why Oromiz and Glade kept such information away from him. They were only looking out for him. Oromiz nodded, seeing that Aragon finally understood why they did not inform him. Pulling out a pouch from behind him, Oromiz started pulling items out. In anticipation of your departure, I gathered together 3 gifts for you, Aragon. From the pouch, he withdrew a silver bottle. First, some Failnerve I augmented with my own enchantments. This potion can sustain you when all else fails, and you may find its properties useful in other circumstances as well. Drink it sparingly, for I only had time to prepare a few mouthfuls. He handed the bottle to Aragon, then removed a long black and blue sword belt from the pouch. The belt felt unusually thick and heavy to Aragon when he ran it through his hands. It was made of cloth threads woven together in an interlocking pattern that depicted a coiling liane vine. At Oromiz's instruction, Aragon pulled at a tassel at the end of the belt and gasped as a strip in its center slid back to expose 12 diamonds, each an inch across. 4 diamonds were white, 4 were black, and the remainder were red, blue, yellow, and brown. They glittered cold and brilliant, like ice in the dawn, casting a rainbow of multicolored specks onto Aragon's hands. Master. Aragon shook his head, at a loss for words for several breaths. Is it safe to give this to me? Guard it well so that none are tempted to steal it. This is the belt of Beloth the Wise, who you read of in your history of the Year of Darkness, and is one of the great treasures of the riders. These are the most perfect gems the riders could find. Some we traded for with the dwarves. Others we won in battle or mined ourselves. The stones have no magic of their own, but you may use them as repositories for your power and draw upon that reserve when in need. This, in addition to the ruby set in Zarok's pommel, will allow you to amass a store of energy so that you do not become unduly exhausted casting spells in battle, or even when confronting enemy magicians. Last, Oromiz brought out a thin scroll protected inside a wooden tube that was decorated with a bas-relief sculpture of the Manoa tree. Unfurling the scroll, Aragon saw the poem he had recited at the Agidi Blodron. It was lettered in Oromiz's finest calligraphy and illustrated with the elf's detailed ink paintings. Plants and animals twined together inside the outline of the first glyph of each quatrain, while delicate scrollwork traced the columns of words and framed the images. I thought, said Oromiz, that you would appreciate a copy for yourself. Aragon stood with 12 priceless diamonds in one hand and Oromiz's scroll in the other, and he knew that it was the scroll he deemed the most precious. Aragon bowed and, reduced to the simplest language by the depth of his gratitude, said, "Thank you, master." Then Oromiz surprised Aragon by initiating the elves' traditional greeting and thereby indicating his respect for Aragon. "May good fortune rule over you. May the stars watch over you. And may peace live in your heart," finished the silver-haired elf. He repeated the exchange with Saphira. "Now go and fly as fast as the north wind, knowing that you, Saphira Brightscales and Aragon Shadeslayer, carry the blessing of Oromiz, last scion of House Thranduin, and the last living elven dragon rider of Gladr." Aragon left with Saphira and continued on to the meeting spot with his group that they set up the moment Aragon found out about the upcoming battle. Aragon landed in a small clearing that the rest of the group were already in. As he landed, Naruto asked, "So, have you taken care of everything you wanted on your side?" "No, there is one last thing. I still want to meet Queen Islanzadi before leaving, but I did not know if Arya wanted to meet with her." Aragon said, "I have already spoken to my mother before coming here. Go to her if you must. We will continue waiting here," Arya said as she stood close to Naruto, while thinking of the conversation she had with her mother. Flashback. "No, I cannot allow this. I have already pushed you away long enough, and what resulted from that? For near a century, I lost the presence of my daughter, all because of a moment of folly from me. Arya Svitkona, I have already lost you once, do not make me experience that pain again." The queen pleaded, except this time in private to show her sincerity to her mother. "I too wish that I was not so stubborn at that time. Maybe then I could have done what Naruto called, the underneath of the underneath. But that time has passed and my place now is with my comrades, my friends, and my closest friend ever since Phelan," Arya declared as Queen Islanzadi widened her eyes, having known how close Arya was to Phelan. "Are you doing this for the good of Alagizia, or are you doing this for Naruto?" The queen asked, curious about her daughter's response in both answer and expression. She watched as her daughter's face went from impassive to slightly vulnerable, and knew the answer without Arya even speaking. Placing a finger on her daughter's lips, the queen softly said, "I see you have made up your mind. But do not use a cause to hide your feelings for this, Naruto. I just hope it does not end as it did with Phelan and that you two end up happily together. So be it. Now go, Arya Drotning, daughter of Queen Islanzadi, princess of the elves, with my blessing." Arya still gave her mother a confused look but eventually bowed, although deep in her heart she started to realize her feelings towards her friend. Flashback end. An hour later, Aragon returned, except this time with an elegant bow with silver chasing slung over his shoulder and a quiver fully of white swan-feathered arrows. As everyone climbed on top of Saphira, all of them could only think of one thing. Stay safe, everyone. Chapter 22, Eve of the Battle of the Burning Plains. The group flew on Saphira the same way they did on their way to Elesmera, except this time Arya joined Auric in Naruto's Kamui dimension. Without the extra weight and Gladr's training, Saphira flew even faster than she did before. As they flew, Aragon explained to Naruto about being able to store energy inside the gems on his hidden belt as well in the jewel on Zarok's hilt. Naruto nodded before allowing Aragon to transfer his energy to the jewels he had. These jewels can take quite a bit of energy, just about a high Chunin's worth of chakra per jewel on his belt and a low Chunin's worth of chakra in that sword of his. Maybe I could store chakra in seals rather than just using them to suppress my chakra and body. Something to think about later. Naruto thought. So Aragon, you told us that the Varden was under imminent attack, but you have not told us where exactly this battle will take place yet. Mind telling us now? Naruto asked. Actually, I do not know exactly where the main Varden camp is. Aragon said as Naruto's sweat dropped. I see. Would it be safe to assume that Ajihad will be with the main Varden army? Naruto asked. Wherever the Varden's army is, Ajihad is definitely there. Are you going to go into your Sage mode? Aragon asked as he remembered the details of Sage mode the blonde told him when he asked him about it after leaving Elesmera. Without answering, Naruto immediately started drawing vast amounts of nature chakra. Within a second, circular markings appeared on his face while his eyes turned golden. After a moment, Naruto pointed in the direction Ajihad's energy signature was coming from. With a nod, Aragon informed Saphira of the new direction through their mental link. Saphira nodded before tilting herself towards the new direction. Before falling asleep, Naruto called upon the powers the dragon from the twins gave him and had the wind flow with Saphira, almost doubling her already speed while cutting her energy cost. 2 days later, Naruto had Arya and Oric exit his Kamui as they approached a long, low brown cloud that had earlier appeared over the distant horizon. The cloud only grew larger and larger as it covered the land beneath with a shroud of foul vapors. Soon the group and Saphira were covered by the dark clouds and almost suffocated when they found out that the clouds were not clouds at all, but rather thick fumes of smoke that emerged from the faint outlines of 2 armies beneath it as well as from other small holes that dotted the landscape. As they descended from the sky, they observed that the large river that ran through the land did not look like it as if water ran through it, but rather a milky white substance with a strange luminescence. The land itself was pockmarked by crevices and was completely devoid of vegetation except for some black, orange, and red lichen that gave the land a scabbed appearance. None of the group had ever laid eyes on a more uninviting place. Then they laid their eyes on the 2 vast armies arrayed beneath them. To the south was the Varden's army with around 30,000 humans and another 30,000 dwarves. In between the 2 armies was a span of land around 2 miles long. But to the north was not merely an army, but a sea of men, horses, and war machines. In that sea was around 100,000 men that were armored in the red and black colors of Galbatorix. As they flew towards the Varden side, a sudden hail of arrows shot towards them. As Naruto raised his palms at the incoming projectiles, Aragon grabbed his friend's wrist and pulled it down before saying, "Let me handle it." Raising his right hand, Aragon cried, "Leta Aurea Thorna." The arrows froze in place. With a flick of his wrist and the word Ganga, he redirected them, sending the darts boring toward the no man's land, where they buried themselves in the barren soil without causing harm. He missed one arrow, though, which was fired a few seconds after the first volley. Aragon leaned as far to his right as he could and, faster than any normal human, but still slow to Naruto, plucked the arrow from the air as Saphira flew past it. A bit much, don't you think? Naruto asked when he saw Aragon grab the offending arrow. Like you're one to talk. You were about to do that Shinra Tensei that you did against the Urgles with Durza. That could have blasted those arrows miles away and you are telling me that catching an arrow is a little much? Aragon deadpanned as Naruto just pouted with Arya and Oric chuckling at the 2 friends' antics. When they finally landed, they were met by the big man Frederick and the guards that shot the arrows at them. Instead of killing them, Aragon merely gave back the arrow he caught earlier while saying encouraging words to all of them. Frederick then led the group to large tent with the emblem of the Varden, a white dragon holding a rose above a sword pointing downward on a purple field. After the group dismounted and entered the tent, Saphira then poked her head through the tent flaps. In the tent stood both Ajihad and his daughter, Maswada over a pile of scrolls and maps as they argued the best course of action for the upcoming battle. Soon they noticed the group standing there. Their eyes widened as they took in Aragon's new look and the apparent closeness between Naruto and Arya. Without having to be asked, Aragon launched into a summary of what happened during their stay in Elesmera, especially how during the Agiti Blodron Aragon experienced a change that gave him elf-like abilities. He did not mention anything about Naruto's powers, figuring that it was up to him if he wanted to let others know. He then told the father-slash-daughter pair about what Queen Islanzadi informed him. The elves were finally leaving the Du Weldenvarden and will be attacking the northern part of the empire and that a group of 12 elven spellcasters will be arriving here, but not in time for the battle. After the 2 gathered all of the information they wanted about from Aragon, the 2 finally turned to Naruto and Arya, noting that the closeness between the 2 was not merely that between simple friends. They did not ask about this however, respecting the 2's privacy but instead asked other things. Naruto, just how many enemy troops are on the other side? Ajihad asked as he wanted to know if the numbers they had matched that of the blondes. I sense around 100,000 humans, but at the same time no Urgles or Kull. It would seem that whatever hold Galbatorix held over them disappeared after the Battle of Farthendur. However, while I have not sensed any Urgles or Kull in their direction, I do feel around 100 of them coming towards us from our side. Funny thing is that they have no negative intentions towards us. So before we have an incident, I think we should send out men to bring them in. Naruto said as the two wondered why exactly the Urgles and Kull were here, and in such few numbers. Instead of pondering this, the two nodded as they had Jormungandr and a few other commanders gather within their tent as well as give orders to allow and escort the incoming Urgles and Kull safely to them. Are you sure we should just let these Urgles and Kull into the camp, not to even to mention the command tent? Surely you don't mean to grant them an audience? Aragon asked. Aragon, despite your newfound powers, Naruto, and the incoming elves, we are still vastly outnumbered. And this time, there is no tunnel that can funnel them in. Whether you like it or not, we are still disadvantaged. Ajihad responded. Naruto walked up to Aragon and clapped a hand on his shoulder. Aragon, do not let the previous battle color your view of them. I remember your experiences with the Urgles and I can see why you have such a negative view of them, and you may even view them as mere animals. But remember that the elves too viewed the dragons as mere animals in the beginning. Do not condemn an entire race for the actions of a few, even if it was a few tens of thousands. And besides, even if they do try anything, did you forget that in this tent is me, Arya, you, and Saphira? Do you honestly think we can't handle whatever that they can throw out at us? Naruto said as Aragon stopped to think about it and nodding his understanding. As the Urgles and the Kull were brought in, one particularly large Kull stepped up in front of them. The Kull was 8.5 feet tall, with strong and proud features, thick horns that spiraled all the way around, bared yellow fangs, and a musculature that spoke of his superior strength. Stepping forward, the Kull lifted his and roared at Ajihad. Knowing the Urgles' customs, Ajihad waved off the others before they could draw their weapons. Thank you, Lord Nightstalker. You have upheld your word of granting us safe passage. The Kull said with a thick, guttural accent. Unlike Galbatorix, we the Varden are not liars and keep our word. Speak your mind, while you are here without negative intentions, you need not fear danger to you or your party. The Kull shifted around before baring his throat, a gesture of friendship. I am Nar Garshvog of the Balvek tribe. I speak for my people. It seemed as if he chewed on each word before spitting it out. Urgles are hated more than any other race. Elves, dwarves, humans all hunt us, burn us, and drive us from our halls. There are obvious reasons behind that, Nar Garshvog. Ajihad shot back. Surprisingly, Garshvog nodded in understanding. Not without reason. Our people love war. Yet how often are we attacked just because you find us as ugly as we find you? We have thrived since the fall of the riders. Our tribes are now so large, the harsh land we live in can no longer feed us. I can see where this is going. You made a pact with Galbatorix in return for better lands. But I am guessing that after the Battle of Farthendur, you sent an envoy to Galbatorix only to get nothing in return. Ajihad mused. That is correct, Lord Nightstalker. Our Herndal, the dams who rule us, sent my brood mate to Galbatorix as that envoy. She did not return. Our finest rams sacrificed themselves for Galbatorix, and he abandoned us like a broken sword. He is Dragil and a Lackhorn betrayer. If you would have us, we will fight for you despite our smaller numbers. We ask for only two things. Garshvog said with anger. And what is it that you want? Ajihad questioned. Blood. We want Galbatorix's blood to forever be gone from this land. And after the Empire falls, we ask that you give us land for breeding and growing, land to avoid more battles in the future. After a few minutes of discussion with his advisors and the group, Ajihad finally lifted his, also baring his throat. That can be done. Consider yourself a part of the Varden from now on. As the Urgles left, Ajihad commanded, spread the word that the Urgles and Kull are now part of the Varden. Anyone that attacks them shall be punished as if he attacked a fellow human, dwarf, or elf. The group mounted Saphira once more when a sentry shouted out that a horseman from Empire was approaching. When the soldier stopped outside of the Varden, he shouted out for them to surrender to Galbatorix and the Empire. As he did so, Naruto leaned over to Aragon and Safra. Is this what people in this land always do? Is there always so much posturing? Well, it is not uncommon. Aragon started, there are quite a few examples of it. Well, that guy is getting quite annoying and I'm guessing that nobody here would want to kill the envoy. So how about we do something special for this guy? Naruto said with sparkles dancing in his eyes. The entire group tried to back as far away as they could while still on Saphira when they saw that trademark gleam in the blonde's eyes. How in the world he decorated the Manoa tree in Christmas decorations or somehow managed to glue both Oromiz and Aragon to their respective dragons where not even magic could do anything, nobody knew. Aragon shuddered at the memory as he asked his blonde friend. What are you thinking of doing, Naruto? Oh, nothing fancy, just have Saphira roar out at him and then while she's doing that, I'll just take off some of my chakra suppressors and direct it to the Empire's army. Naruto said innocently as everyone quickly paled, having felt how much pressure the blonde could give off, when he was not trying. They did not even want to think about what would happen if completely took off his limiters. I like this plan. It's just what a dragon would do. Shock and awe. Saphira thought through their mind link as Aragon nodded towards Naruto. Alright. 3, 2, 1. Naruto said. Just as the envoy threw a severed head towards the Varden, Saphira opened her jaws and roared out, shaking the air and forcing the armies and the envoy to cover their ears if they didn't want broken eardrums. But what came right after the roar started shocked everyone. A sudden pressure crushed down on the army of the Empire, forced everyone to crash down to the ground, and start coughing out whatever they ate and in some cases, blood. The envoy looked around wildly, trying to see the source of the mountain-like pressure when he suddenly saw a patch of distorted air on top of the sapphire dragon and a man, with the strangest eyes he had ever seen. In a few seconds, the pressure slowly lifted as the soldiers of the Empire were finally able to stand back up, although now completely in fear of the Varden and the man behind the dragon rider. Well, it seems they got the message. Naruto said as Saphira flew the group back to the ground and into the ranks of the Varden. The Battle of the Burning Plains was about to begin. Chapter 23, Last Prank Before Battle. As soon as the group landed back down on the ground, they were met with Ajihad, Naswada, and a small group of 4 Ko. Ajihad greeted them as he began to lay out the plans for the upcoming battle. Aragon, you will lead the Duvrang Regatta and help them target the Empire's spellcasters. However, if Galbatorix appears with Shuriken, you will face him alone. The Duvrang Regatta is no more a threat to you, as it is to him, and I refuse to sacrifice them for nothing. Before the elves sent by Queen Islanzadi arrive, your flank will be guarded by the dwarves and Garshvog's finest Ko, who are willing to be mentally checked for treachery by you. Before Aragon could protest Ajihad's decision, Naruto laid a hand on his shoulder while looking directly into his eyes. Aragon, do not let your past encounters color your vision right now. They are willing to lay their very lives and memories before you. You cannot just wave that kind of resolution away. Aragon gave Naruto a look before nodding his agreement and striding towards Nar Garshvog and his Ko. Naruto watched as Aragon went through the Ko's minds, noting how his expression went from disgust, to surprise, and finally to open admiration. Naruto smiled as Aragon finished his mind examination while baring his throat in respect to Nar Garshvog and welcoming the Ko to the Varden. Once the examination was done, Ajihad pulled Naruto aside and away from sight of the others. When they were out of sight, Ajihad began telling the blonde, Naruto, honestly, I still do not know if I and the Varden can trust you. From your memories, I can tell that you were at least once an honorable man, but there is always a chance that you have changed for the worse, especially with all of that power you wield. However, after seeing you obviously having the trust of Aragon, Saphira, and Arya, I will trust their judgment. Much like Aragon, I have never had a person like you under my command. You are completely unlike any other soldier, even more so than Aragon and Saphira, for at least they're still people who remember how they fought. All I can ask is for you to help us in whatever way you can, and if Aragon is ever in trouble, do everything you can to save him. For he is the symbol that all the races of Alagizia can rally under to fight the Empire. Naruto stood there, thinking through all of Ajihad's words and found them reasonable. After all, how could anyone immediately trust a total stranger with enormous power in his hands? Ajihad, I understand your hesitation in trusting me. I only hope that after this battle you will finally be able to trust me and know that as long you are fighting the Empire, I will not harm the Varden. As for Aragon, there is no need to ask me to protect him as he is one of my few friends on this continent. But I have feeling that there is still something you wish to ask me? Naruto questioned as the leader of the Varden looked a bit startled. There is indeed something I wish to ask of you, but I was afraid that I was pushing my bounds. But if it is possible, please protect my daughter, Niswada. Should I fall, she is to be my successor. She has the potential to be a greater leader than me, but she just needs time to mature and gain more experience in the difficulties in leading such a large army and organization. Ajihad said after a moment of hesitation. Naruto thought about it before nodding in confirmation to the request. Will Niswada be leading a division of soldiers herself, or will she stay by you? As Ajihad confirmed the former option, Naruto continued. Then for at least the beginning of the battle, I will stay by her side and protect her from all fatal harm. However, I will move how as I think I should, and should Niswada try to dissuade me for no good reason, I will ignore her orders. After that, Naruto shunted away back to the group, to stop in front of Nar Garshvog and his cul. As he suddenly appeared in mid-air, Garshvog and his cul almost pulled out their weapons. When they saw who it was, they paused their actions, although they still kept a hand on their weapons. Naruto, we are honored to have the chance to battle alongside such a mighty warrior, and one who has done so much for us. Garshvog said once he identified the blonde. Naruto started, not expecting the compliment that he recognized from the texts he read, nor the sincerity behind the statement. Why are you saying this? I slaughtered thousands of your best like sheep. If anything, your entire race should have an unresolvable grudge against me. Naruto, you obviously do not know much of our way of life. We are a people who value feats in battle above all else. To be able to kill so many of our finest rams and even help Fire's Word defeat Durza and free us from his control, places you above even Fire's Word and his flame tongue. Should you ever come to our halls, we will welcome you like none before. These Urgles are just like the Kaguya clan, the bone manipulators. They value feats in battle above all else and seem to enjoy the fight just as much. Naruto mused as he stuck out a hand for the cul to shake. After a moment of confusion, Garshvog realized what the blonde wanted and also held out his hand. However, the moment their hands met, Naruto pulled the 8.5 feet giant closer before whispering. I know that Aragon has already mind-examined you and has obviously found nothing wrong. But, should you ever betray his trust, I will hunt you all down. While I won't kill the women, children, or the elderly, I will set your people so far back that they won't be able to recover within the next century. You need not worry about that, Naruto. As long the Varden keeps their word, we will have no reason to fight. Also we are not like Galbatorix, once we give our word, we keep it. Garshvog said, not surprised at the threat from the blonde. Naruto appeared next to Aragon, who was once again on Saphira. Naruto. Just how many times do I have to tell you to stop doing that? Aragon said as he almost bisected the blonde that appeared behind him. Just how does he do that? Even with my new improvements, I still can't sense him when he does that. Don't think about it, little one. I'm the one he's standing on, and I never felt a thing. Did you need something, Naruto? Aragon asked. Aragon, I will be guarding Niswada, at least at the beginning of the battle. So I will not be fighting with you. I know that with your strength that you do not need my help against the regular army or even the Empire's spellcasters. However, expect the unexpected. Should Galbatorix or Kami forbid another rider shows up, you will be alone for at least part of that battle. If I am correct, you won't be able to draw energy from me so far away. So remember the Hiraition kunai you have with you. The moment you need help, just throw it at your opponent or the ground and I will be there. Naruto said as he shunted away after Aragon confirmed that he still had the Hiraition kunai to where he felt Arya was. Naruto stopped in front of a lone tent that seemed somewhat isolated from the rest of the sea of tents of the Varden. Flaring his chakra, a little so that Arya could tell who was outside, Naruto then stepped inside. As he did, he noticed the bareness of the space, which was not unexpected considering Arya's personality. But he stopped when he saw Arya changing out of her dust-ridden clothes and into a comfortable outfit, which completely hugged her figure, to be worn underneath her hardened elven leather armor. Blinking rapidly, Naruto was about to turn around to leave out of consideration when Arya started to speak. Naruto Vor, is there something you need? If you need a moment to change, I can wait outside until you are done, you know. No need, I am already nearly done, or have you forgotten the speed of the elves? Arya said with an amused tone. Hearing this, Naruto turned around to see Arya already in her leather armor and fully dressed. Clearing his throat, Arya, I will be protecting Niswada at the beginning of the battle, so I will not be able to help until I confirm that Niswada and her men will be able to protect themselves on the battlefield. But remember the Hiratian kunai I gave you back then. Should you ever need me, throw it and I will be there in a flash. And remember your training. Arya gave a confused look at her friend, wondering how exactly her little training could be used. Arya, tell me, do you remember how many men there are out there? Arya immediately answered. 100,000 men and spellcasters. You forgot about the 60,000 men and dwarves of the Varden plus a few thousand Urgals. Naruto said in a teasing tone while Arya frowned a little at the trick question. Now imagine that number of men and dwarves clashing against each other. Think about the amount of blood being spilled on the battlefield and the resulting slipperiness of the ground. Think about the number of swords and spears being stabbed, hacked, and slashed at you. Don't you think that being able to stick to the ground would negate most of those disadvantages? Naruto said as Arya's eyes widened at the potential applications of such a simple thing. Just as Naruto was leaving the tent, a slightly unsteady voice rang. Naruto, will you be alright? You won't leave me alone, not again. Arya said, insecurity for the first time showing on her face before looking at the floor. Lightly smiling, Naruto started walking with 2 fingers outstretched. Stopping right before Arya, Naruto continued the path of his arm until his 2 fingers poked Arya's smooth, pale forehead. Arya flinched as she felt a firm and unexpected poke to her forehead. Glaring slightly at the blonde, Arya was about to complain until she saw the soft smile on his face. Arya, my best friend in Alagaezia, of all people, do not worry about me. As long as you have that kunai, you will never be alone, not now, not ever. Naruto reassured Arya as he walked away. Arya stood there for a moment while tightly holding the unused Hiratian kunai Naruto had given her what now seems a lifetime ago before stepping out the tent and towards the battlefield. After speaking to Arya, Naruto moved to where Niswada was, with her men. But when he searched the energy signatures around her, he gave a grunt of surprise when he recognized one of them that was wrapped around her. Naruto's eye glinted as brought out a camera from one of his seals. He then muttered, Totan Jutsu, and disappeared from sight as he then activated his Kamui to become intangible as he walked through the walls of the tent. What he saw would have made Jiraiya proud to write in his Ika Ika series. The daughter of the leader of the Varden, Niswada, was practically melded together with the son of Morzan, Murta, as they heavily made out with a sense of desperation from the upcoming battle. They continued until they heard a soft click. Drawing their swords, the whirled around, back to back, as they searched for the source of the sound. Come out, you coward. If you're here to fight, then let's get this over with. Murta shouted at the empty space as he tried to shield Niswada. Man, you gotta loosen up, Murta. At least you're not like Sasuke in regards to girls, or else I might have mistaken you for him. Naruto said as he dropped the jutsu, but still clicking away with the camera at the pair. Naruto. It's good to see you. Are Aragon and Saphira alright? Niswada told me that they had returned, but that he looked more like an elf with a few human features. And what is that clicking box? Murta asked as he dropped his guard. Well, Aragon is actually better than ever before. While his body and face changed, he is still that man you knew from before, just more mature and less naive to the ways of the world. As for this clicking box, this is a camera. Care to guess what it does? Naruto asked back as he saw Murta shake his head. It takes completely realistic pictures of the things these lens is pointed at. Now, want to know what pictures I took? Naruto asked again with a foxy smile as the pair paled noticeably, even Niswada. Naruto. How could you? As your commanding officer, I demand those pictures. Niswada yelled at the blonde with a flustered tone. How about, nope? Naruto said as he raced around the tent before Niswada could pounce on him. Before he completely left, he said a few parting words. Niswada, I'll be back at dawn before the battle begins. And Murta, nice job. Naruto said and exited with a thumbs up and a gleaming smile that would have done Lee and Guy proud. Naruto shunshined away from the army to enter his Kamui and wait for the battle to begin. Chapter 24, Battle of the Burning Plains. So Naruto, it seems another battle is approaching, except this one will be far larger and bloodier than the one before. Also there is no tunnel this time, so you can't hide your abilities as had before. And because of the many improvements you experienced in that elven forest, you will have to increase your resistance and chakra seals even further if you want to hide your abilities still. Kurama said while in the Kamui dimension. True, but should I continue to hide my abilities? If I continue to hide and limit my abilities by such a large margin, many of the Varden will die, and for some reason, I have a bad feeling about this battle. Naruto answered. Kurama narrowed his giant eyes at that statement, knowing that his host's instincts were almost always correct, probably a sense honed when he was still abused by the village when he was young. In that case, I suggest revealing a few more jutsus, and I hate saying this, your Taiju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. However, increase your resistance seals to 40x because of that damn dragon's blessing. Your body is now quite a bit lighter with the wind that is constantly flowing around you. Also, keep your chakra suppressors to that of a high Chunin level and only if needed, to Kage level reserves. Any more and you risk just annihilating their entire army, 100,000 men or not. This battle should definitely evolve your body much further than it did in that mountain. Kurama instructed Naruto as it became dawn outside the Kamui dimension. Damn that blonde, just where is he? I sent men looking for him all over the camp, but so far there's no sign of him. Niswada fumed as Murta tried to calm her down. Niswada, calm down just a little. Knowing Naruto, he would never break his word. Besides, even when dealing with the Council of Elders, you are not usually this irate. Murta said, trying to comfort his partner. Niswada sighed, knowing that Murta was correct, otherwise her father would never entrust her safety with Naruto. I know love, but something about that blonde really rubs me the wrong way. It's not that I hate him, it's just that after what he did last night, I find his very presence a little annoying. Nah, that seems rather mean, don't you think so, Murta? Said a voice behind the pair. Whirling around, the two saw the blonde again clad in what he wore in the Battle of Farthen-Dur. A white trenchcoat with red kanji and a fire-like pattern on the bottom over a standard Konoha Jonin outfit. Naruto, one day there will be somebody fast enough to lop off a body part or two if you keep doing that. Murta sighed, but understanding from the blonde's displays of power that no one in Alagizia could possibly do that except for perhaps Galbatorix. Naruto. Where were you this entire time? I had men looking for you, men that could have been getting used to the battlefield and prepping for battle. Niswada asked, demanding answers from the blonde. Understanding from where she was coming from, Naruto merely tilted his head to one side before answering. I did say that I would be here when it was dawn, and here I am. When I say I will do something, then I will do it. Now come, what is your strategy for your soldiers and how many do you have? Niswada looked at the blonde before sighing, knowing that her outburst was a little uncalled for but rather from the nerves and jitters before the upcoming battle. I have 10,000 men under my command. There is not much that can be done differently other than arranging all of the shield bearers in front and have them interlock shields, in order to prevent the Empire from overrunning us from their sheer numbers. After the initial clash, I will have spear bearers start to attack over the shields and after the line breaks, have the men switch to swords to engage in the inevitable melee. I will have the commanders under me and their key men protected by spellcasters, both mentally and physically, while these spellcasters stay in the back with the archers, who will constantly attack whenever they can. As for Murta and me, we will stay among the men and direct the battle. Naruto thought about the strategy and honestly could not find much fault to it, especially when most of the men that were fighting were only using weapons and not magic. However, Kit, tell me you're not going to pull a Madara. I thought that you didn't want to draw attention to you. Kurama said as he grew a little worried, not for his safety, but for his relative anonymity. I did, Kurama, and I still do. But this is the only way to lessen the casualties while protecting Niswada without resulting to mass destruction jutsus. Besides, most of the attention will be drawn towards Aragon and his giant, shiny, blue dragon. Naruto said back as he looked at Niswada in the eyes and stated his suggestion. Niswada hesitated in answering, having heard of the fact that the man in front of her had eliminated 4,000 Urgles and Kull by himself from her father. She thought about it for another minute before reluctantly nodding her agreement, hoping that she was not making a mistake. Within the hour, the Varden assembled and poured through the gaps of their fortifications they had set up beforehand as they snuck up on the still unawares Empire. When they were 3/4 of the way through, the sentries of the Empire spotted them and the sounds of horns and shouts rang out from the enemy camp. Aragon, Saphira, and Arya started towards the enemy's army when they suddenly noticed a lone blonde with a white trenchcoat running ahead of Neswata's division and straight towards the still assembling enemy army. While they knew of the blonde's power, they still worried that a random spear or sword among the 100,000 men could still end his life. Naruto ran towards the incoming army and activated his Rinne Sharingan while pulling out a Hiraishin Kwani and sending a slight amount of chakra through his muscles, activating Tsunade's super strength. While he was now as strong as Tsunade, it was not nearly as strong as he could become. Now, let's dance. The men of the Empire gulped their saliva down as they recognized the blonde as the man that nearly crushed them with his mere power. Uncontrollably, they drew their weapons and ran while yelling towards the incoming blonde blur, as if by instinct they knew that if they did not fight now, they would never get to fight. Like a wrecking ball, Naruto bulldozed through the enemy lines, leaving a trail of blood and gore as the sheer force of his charge shattered the much more fragile men of Algesia. With his eyes constantly spinning, he saw the paths of the incoming swords, spears, and arrows and effortlessly redirected the weapons towards the enemy while still bisecting people left and right as he channeled wine chakra along his kunai. A man attempted to impale the blonde with a thrown spear when Naruto simply grabbed the spear and threw it right back at its owner while impaling the man and 10 more behind him. Another soldier, clad in red and black, and his comrades circled the blonde before slashing at him, not caring about the possible injuries they could inflict on each other as Naruto swept his kunai out while extending the wind chakra beyond the kunai itself, slashing all of the men in two at the waist. Soon enough, a spellcaster attempted to penetrate his mind, only for Kurama to suddenly appear before him, roaring out in annoyance as such an insignificant being dared to even try to penetrate his friend's mind. The spellcaster immediately grew limp, dying from the sheer amount of power that ran through his mind to the point of melting it. Hearing a sound behind him, he looked over his shoulder to see the Varden starting to crash into the Empire's ranks as they followed the blonde's example. Kurama, the Varden have arrived, and as much as I hate to say it, I'm not destroying the enemy fast enough. Soon, Neswata will be entangled in the fighting. My job will become much harder as I know she will be in the thick of the fighting. Naruto thought to Kurama as he punched with the hand without the kunai into another man, shooting the corpse into one of the catapults that the Empire had brought and directly destroying it, the force behind the human projectile completely overwhelming any sort of magical protections around the catapult. Are you finally going to be using that kunai in your hand for its true purpose rather than slashing people in half? Not that I'm complaining. Kurama snickered in the mindscape. Yes, it's time to kick it up a notch. Naruto said as he started to lift off the ground using the new powers he gained from the twins' dragon. Aragon, Arya, and Saphira had long taken to the air, with Arya performing a mighty leap just as Saphira was about to lift off, to witness the massacre happening around their friend. They watched with sick fascination and admiration as they saw Naruto run straight through the men as if they were not there, redirect all of the weapons around him, and slash and dodge all of the soldiers around him. Their friend was like a force of nature, completely unstoppable and untouchable. Aragon, it's our turn. The Varden are moving again and it is time for us to lead the men into the fight. Saphira said to both Aragon and Arya. Aragon and Arya shook themselves from their stupor of watching their friend and were about to land when they saw Naruto suddenly fly up into the air. They worried whether their friend was forced to retreat when they suddenly saw him throw the kunai in his hand that suddenly multiplied into the thousands to land among the red and black army, killing many on their own. They wondered what exactly he was planning when suddenly he disappeared from the air as a patch of the battlefield turned into a series of yellow flashes and red of flying blood and gore. Seconds later, what was around 10,000 men was only a red pool of blood, body parts, and chunks of ripped armor and a blond man with a now red-stained trenchcoat standing in the middle. The battle paused for a moment as both sides stared with wide eyes at the destruction and slaughter that one man did. With a resounding cheer, the Varden continued their assault as the Empire stepped back as they tried to regain their morale. The trio that descended from the sky just stared at the single bare patch in their enemy's army that was still visible from where they stood. Once they landed, as Arya bounded off of Saphira and ran to where Naruto was last seen from above. Let's go Saphira, we can't let Naruto do everything. Soon enough Neswata and her division will be clashing with the Empire's army and Naruto will be severely limited at that time. Now Saphira, shall we dance, friend of my heart? Aragon asked as he unconsciously used the same words as Naruto. We shall, little one. The two then dove into the fight, melded together as never before. Neither could tell who it was that swept away 10 of the soldiers while breathing out sapphire flames that incinerated another dozen nor who cut through an iron great shield and its wielder. Regardless, the pair ravaged through the enemy lines while being flanked by both the dwarves and Nar Garshvog's Kull. Naruto caught another arrow from potentially piercing between the gap of Niswada's helmet and armored breastplate. He sighed as he realized the worst threats to her life were not the thousands of swords and spears, but the annoying arrows that flew towards them from the sky. If he even tried to attempt one of his jutsus, he would instead hit his allies as well as the enemies. As he continued guarding Niswada, he noticed Arya running towards him while decapitating and sending green blasts of energy around her. He smiled at the sight, admiring at how she seemed to just fit on the battlefield. As he did so, he suddenly got the bad feeling that he felt earlier. Arya ran through the men, killing anyone in her way, as she made a beeline towards Naruto. As soon as she saw her blonde friend, she smiled as she dashed toward him. Then she saw his frown. She paused for a moment when all of a sudden a dragon's roar resounded throughout the entire burning plains. And it wasn't Saphira's roar. That's it for part 3. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.